I'm just, you know, 'cause I'm. Jeez.
Good evening. I hereby call to order the action session of the Board of School Commissioners for Thursday, October 25th. The colors this evening will be posted by the Color Guard from George Washington High School, led by Cadre Advisor Sergeant First Class Salomon Garrett, Jr. Please rise for the presentation of the colors.
Color guard, attention. Carry color. Forward. March.
March, Sal. March. Left guard, march. Group, halt. Present, colors.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, color. Outward, face. Forward, march. Group, halt. Prepare to pose. Pose. Present, arm. Order, arm. Left, face. Mark time, march. Forward, march. Thank you to the Color Guard from George Washington High School. Mr. Mulholland, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Arnold,
Here.
Commissioner Bentley,
Here.
Secretary Gore, Commissioner Hoops,
Here.
Vice President Moore,
Here.
President O'Connor,
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Mulholland. We will now adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. The agenda was reviewed on Tuesday and reflects all necessary modifications or additions. Reviewing the modified agenda, are there requests for changes to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is adopted. We'll now proceed to section 2 of the agenda. Each month, we invite students to showcase their talents. Tonight's performance comes to us as a courtesy of Shortridge High School. Please welcome the Shortridge High School Band. I think they can still hear us in the hallway. Let's give the band another big round of applause. We have some very special recognitions to make this evening. Tonight, we will honor the top 10 teachers as chosen through the Teacher of the Year program. I'll ask Commissioner Hoops to start to introduce our nominees tonight, and Dr. Fairby and I will join at the front to greet each of the nominees.
The IPS Board of School Commissioners is pleased to recognize the top 10 teachers in our district as chosen and honored through the Teacher of the Year program. Each year, IPS conducts this program to recognize our outstanding educators, inspire and rejuvenate and uplift the teaching profession. Within the district, schools nominate and elect the top teacher in their building. From there, a special selection committee uses a rigorous process to determine the top 10, ending with the selection of the IPS Teacher of the Year. This year's winner is Alexandria Stewart, Center for Inquiry, School 70. Ms. Stewart has been a teacher for nearly 5 years. She currently teaches middle school at CFI 70. She helped design and implement a new middle school program. Stewart believes learning is social and best stimulated when students question, experiment, bounce ideas off one another, and become confident taking risks. We are thrilled that Ms. Stewart is representing the teachers of IPS. This year's finalists are Chris Boylan, George Washington High School. Mr. Boylan has been a life skills teacher for 17 years, with 16 of those years at George Washington. He also serves as a unified track and field coach and president of the George Washington High School Dollars for Scholars chapter. During his career, Mr. Boylan has been an advocate for families of students with special needs, presenting to groups locally, regionally, and nationally on a range of topics to benefit his students. A product of IPS himself, Boylan attended district schools from grades K through 12 and graduated from Northwest High School. Eric Catalier, Center for Inquiry, School 2. Eric, or Mr. Cat as his students call him, is a grade 6 through 8 language arts teacher at CFI 2. It's a position he's held since 2012. Mr. Cat began his teaching career as Arsenal Tech High School in 2008. Diagnosed with dyslexia in first grade, he believes this learning disability has allowed him to be a successful teacher, helping him excel in breaking down information in new and interesting ways, building relationships with students, and differentiating classroom activities to appeal to a variety of learners and skill levels. Yay, Mr. Cat! And my child's homeroom school teacher.
Jordan Pfaff, Thomas Gregg Neighborhood School. Jordan Pfaff has served as a special education teacher for grades 2 through 8 at Thomas Gregg Neighborhood School since 2014. Education, however, wasn't her initial career choice. Jordan received her bachelor's degree in hospitality and tourism management from Purdue University, but later went back to school to receive her master's in teaching from Marian University. Ms. Pfaff believes teaching is her life's calling and says her desire to do work that matters led to her education. A member of the IPS Diversity Cadre and the Thomas Gregg School Culture and Community Engagement Committee, Pfaff is committed to educating reluctant and marginalized students. Kristen Gladish, Newcomer Program. Ms. Gladish has been a teacher for 9 years. She currently teaches music at the IPS Newcomer Program. She started and built the music program at the school last year. Ms. Gladish works with newly arrived immigrants and refugee students, many of whom suffer from trauma and have had a severely interrupted formal education. She believes in the therapeutic power of music. Rachel Head, Center for Inquiry, School 84. Mrs. Head is a first grade teacher at CFI 84. She has held this position for the last 4 years. Rachel supports students in many ways, both in and out of the classroom, including serving as co-director of the CFI 84 musical, leader of the theater club, high ability coordinator, and member of the school equity and school leadership teams. She also values an education that includes student voices, questions, and authentic discoveries.
Jamie Rickard from Broad Ripple High School. Mr. Rickard has spent 15 years teaching, all of them in IPS. He currently works at Crispus Attucks High School, but he was teaching history and government at Broad Ripple High School when he was nominated last year. He plans and uses innovative and research-based strategies that engage students in meaningful tasks. He takes great joy in being part of the school community in many capacities, coaching athletics, serving on committees, attending school functions, even playing in the band. Paige Georgsma couldn't be with us this evening, but I want to go ahead and read about her. Ms. Georgsma is a teacher for 5 years, all of them in IPS. She's at the Butler University Lab School at School 60. She currently teaches English language arts in grades 6 through 7 at School 60. Paige is devoted to creating equitable education for all students. That includes fighting systemic racism.
Michael Smith from Arlington High School. Michael has served the students of Indianapolis Public Schools for the past 2 years, initially teaching secondary English language arts to freshmen at Arlington High School. He's now a teacher at George Washington High School. Mr. Smith has made it his life's goal to ensure all students, no matter the socioeconomic background, have access to a quality education through his work in the classroom and Teach for America. He often designs classroom lessons around students' interests. Finally, Eric Van Vielen. Mr. Van Vielen has been teaching for nearly 3 years, all of them at IPS. He's currently a teacher at Center for Inquiry, School 27, but when he was nominated last year, he was teaching 2nd grade at Super School 19. He aims to teach the whole student, going beyond their academic needs and taking into account the emotional, mental, and physical needs of the students. Now, please join me in giving all of our top 10 teachers for the 2018-19 school year a round of applause.
Moving on to Section 3, opening comments. Does any commissioner wish to offer opening comments this evening? Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes, thank you, President O'Connor. I would like to address a concern that I've heard expressed more frequently over the past few weeks, and that is the complaint that IPS and the board are not transparent enough as a public organization. Because the concept of transparency is a rather vague, subjective term, I thought I'd do some quick research to see if there are any acknowledged standards for what constitutes best practice for school boards. And I quickly came across a set of guidelines on Ballotpedia. I asked staff to briefly review our current practices against these standards, and I'm pleased to share that IPS actually does quite well in meeting the recommended standards. Staff looked at the availability of information across 11 different categories, and I will name those shortly. And in most of those categories, we met all of the metrics. In the few areas that we were lacking, we were not totally deficient, but could ideally include some additional information. Dr. Farabee, I would like to request that the administration do a more thorough review of our practices and report back to the board with any recommendations for improvement. And additionally, I would request from members of the public that they please share any specific areas of concern. This board and this administration take great pride in being open and transparent. It's a quality that we all value. We are working really hard to be a continuously improving organization. Here are the 11 categories for which we met or nearly met the objective criteria that have been established by a very recognized sunshine in government organization. In terms of budget, school district government meeting and agendas, elected official information, school district administrator information, access to government records and public documents, contracts with teachers and support staff, contracts with vendors, audits, financial and performance information, tax burden, criminal background checks, and academic performance. So those are all of the kind of general categories that we're expected to have readily available public information, and we have at least preliminary information on all of those categories as being currently available to the public. So I hope we can look forward to doing that.
Thank you for raising this issue, and we continue to be committed to being one of the most transparent school corporations in the state and across the nation, and will happily respond to the request.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any other commissioner comments? Moving on to the public comment session. It is my understanding that while we have 3 commenters tonight, they are commenting specifically on items in the later in the agenda. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, your understanding is correct.
I will go ahead and go over the guidelines for public commenters. I'll remind our speakers who will come up later. We'll call you on the agenda items you have requested. You're allowed 3 minutes to offer comments to the board. A timer will start when you begin, and I ask that you briefly conclude your remarks when the timer goes off. Comments should be directed to the board collectively, should not be abusive or disruptive, should not address a topic that might be of a confidential nature or that would compromise the impartiality of the board. I'll also remind our speakers that while the board is happy to receive your comments, we will not respond to any particular answer or not respond or answer any questions at this time. If you have signed up to speak on a topic on the agenda, you'll be called when that item is before the board. Moving to the consent agenda, the items included on the consent agenda were reviewed at our agenda review session on Tuesday and reflect all necessary modifications. Are there any questions or requests to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Having no board reports, I turn the agenda over to Dr. Farabee.
Thank you, President O'Connor. Good evening, Commissioners. The first superintendent report for tonight is the monthly school spotlight. We're pleased to highlight the work occurring at Raymond Brandeis School 65 this evening. We're fortunate to have the principal, Lauren Johnson, who will come forward and share more about what's happening in the building and some of their accomplishments to date and what they're looking to achieve over the next school year. So welcome, Ms. Johnson, and we're excited to have you and learn more about your work.
Good evening, Dr. Farabee and Board of Commissioners. It is my privilege to share with you this evening why Raymond Brandeis Elementary School 65 is the best school in the state of Indiana. And that's how I go and tell the students every morning as I go to the classrooms. I greet them, good morning, best 6th graders in the state of Indiana. Good morning, best 1st graders in the state of Indiana. In order to do this, we're going to talk a little bit about what makes us special. We're going to talk about some things such as why we are moving and how we are moving full steam ahead. We're going to share a little bit of information about our data and goals. We're going to even talk a little bit about getting wiggy with it tonight. And then we'll wrap up by talking about our career and community connections. So this evening, who is Raymond Brandeis? Raymond Brandeis is a graduate, or was a graduate of Manual High School. He owned a pharmacy and other businesses in the Indianapolis area, and he was a member of the IPS school board. This is important because as we talk about our STEAM and STEM initiative, and also about ensuring that our students not only become partners or actually work in careers but become leaders in their career fields, we want to make sure that we are making the name and the memory of Raymond Brandis proud. At Raymond Brandis, great literature and literacy skills are embedded in all subjects, and all teachers are reading and math teachers. So during our language arts success time, you will see our PE teacher and our art teacher working with literature groups and reading with students and asking them those higher level questions about literature. Also, if you go into the PE class as they're warming up, they'll be practicing those math facts. Or if you go into the art class, she'll be sharing a story or a book that is related to the skills that students are working on. We had the privilege of receiving a school improvement grant, which allowed us to purchase book sets for small groups and classes, and teachers were able to choose many of the titles that they wanted in these classrooms. A lot of these sets also came with learning activities that teachers can use, so literacy is embedded in all of our subject areas. At Raymond Brandis, students are taught to use technology to research and communicate about their world. So we not only focus on them practicing math facts and other skills, but they go in and they find out what is the best resource or what is the best source for me to learn about what's happening. They also get to read things like Scholastic Online or News ELA stories that allow them to connect with their world. At Raymond Brandis, students engage in learning experiences that allow them to develop the habits of minds of different careers. And we'll talk about that a little bit later through our community partnerships, our connections, and our STEAM lab. And our school is a member of multiple community organizations, and we participate in service learning activities throughout the year. We are pleased to say that Raymond Brandis Elementary School is truly a community school. So how are we focusing and moving full steam ahead? And why was that one of our themes that was chosen? On June 13th, 2018, our school was privileged to receive a new makerspace, which is a STEAM lab from AbbVie Inc. and Heart of America. In order to receive this makerspace, our school had to submit a proposal that outlined how we would use and sustain a lab that focused on science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Each week, students get to engage in activities that focus on those areas. And on Think About Science Thursdays, which was today, we do a science spotlight on morning announcements. For example, today we talked about the science of smell. As we're coming into fall and we're dealing with all these nice smelling candles, did you know that scientists actually have to go through a problem-solving process in order to determine what is the right smell for the right place? So everything that we do involves science. Our staff members are continually finding grants and resources to help with the materials so that we can provide literature, special guests, special family STEAM nights, and also through our College Mentors program, we're able to embed our students in learning more about those careers and also about what science, technology, engineering, and math means in their everyday life. We focus on 4 C's in our STEAM lab. We focus on challenges where students are presented with different challenges that they have to solve. Creativity, students get to use research and creativity skills to identify possible solutions to a problem. For example, if you have a parachute, what is the best way to make that parachute float gently so that you don't just fall straight and have a strong impact that is harmful to the body? Students actually worked on that activity before break. Collaboration. Students get to work together to see whose solution might be the best and what may need to be changed. And then connections. Students make connections between themselves, their community, and their world. We were thrilled to learn when we had our community banquet at the end of last school year that one of our guests, who is an architect, became an architect because of a makerspace experience. So when we saw our kindergartners today working in our makerspace using blocks and connects to build homes or to build other buildings, it showed us that we have future architects of America right at Raymond Brandis. Some of our demographics and data that makes Raymond Brandis special. We are thrilled that Raymond Brandis is so culturally diverse. We're about 48% Caucasian, 22% African American, 24% Latino. We also have about 6% of our students that are Burmese, African, or multiracial. And what I love about our school is we all get along together. So when I talk about the fact that we are truly a family and a community-oriented school, that is evidenced as you see our students working together. Something we were very proud of last year, when our students first took the IRE3 practice test, they were unfamiliar with the testing format, and unfortunately, we only had about 20% passing at the beginning of the year. By the end of the year, 81% of our students passed IRE3, and that is thanks to the hard work of our teachers and our students. Our TRC data, which is our reading assessment that is given, showed that we increased the number of students benchmarked or above by the end of the year by more than 20%, and our discipline referrals decreased and our suspensions decreased by 20%. That was largely in part to teachers building stronger relationships with students, letting students know what are some strategies and techniques that they could use. So if I'm having a rough day or I'm not feeling quite myself, I can breathe, I can journal, or I can go and find that special person in the building that I have the strongest connection with. And we provide time and opportunity for that. So this year, our goal is to get wiggy with it. I had the privilege of attending a national conference this summer for elementary school principals, and Sean Covey was sharing work from his book, 4 Disciplines of Execution. He talked about how achieving your highest goals involve you focusing on those wildly important goals, or the WIGs. So we have a little chant, getting wiggy with it, na 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 na, na 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 na. And we say that as we celebrate. As a matter of fact, we'll be saying that tomorrow morning at our honors convocation. And so all of our students, in addition to our staff, are focused on 2 to 3 things that they would like to grow on each quarter. During 2018-19, our goal is to increase the number of students passing IRE3 by 20%. During 2018-19, at least 60% of our students in 3rd through 6th grades will pass iLearn. And during 2018-19, we will maintain a 96% or higher student and staff attendance rate. And we do those by having small celebrations during the week. We also have celebrations at each quarter, and then we'll have celebrations at the semester and the end of the year. Once again, we're getting wiggy with it. When I began my tenure at Raymond Brandis, we had about 2 programs that we participated with the University of Indianapolis, which is just a block away. And now we are thrilled to say that we have over 6 programs that we work with UIndy on. So in the fall and spring semesters, students meet for classes for a couple of weeks, and then they also do observations and field experiences to learn more about teaching and learning. We also participate in a College Mentors program along with students from Paul I. Miller. For College Mentors, our students get to go over to the University of Indianapolis at least once a week, where they participate in activities related to careers and college life. We have the Student Education Association that comes and does activities such as Read Across America Week activities with us. Then we also have a very strong connection with the nursing department. Nursing students come and do presentations on health. They host family nights, but they also partner with us in other ways. So we've had nursing students come and beautify our front yard by planting flowers. We also partnered with them one year and raised or collected over 1,000 pounds of food, non-perishables and canned goods for a local food pantry. And just today, our nursing students for this semester came and they were putting together what we call SACs. We call them our nutrition club, where we have students that get nutritious treats at the end of the week. And our nursing students heard that we had to decrease the number of students that were participating this year. So they worked with organizations to ensure that at least 8 to 10 more students are able to participate in the program. So we're very proud of that. We developed a partnership with Oasis organization where we have lunchtime tutoring and mentoring. We call them lunch buddies. So UIndy students come and read with our students. And just over fall break, I had the privilege of meeting with the public health students. They will be coming and doing a day of fitness activities and providing resources that students can use at home to stay physically fit. Also, the Student Athletic Association has met with us, and they would like to begin an after-school mentoring program. So we are continuing to have very strong conversations that will build our partnership and make it even stronger with the University of Indianapolis. Our focus will be on our STEAM and literacy initiatives. In addition to that, we also participate in many other additional programs. We have the ProAct Kids in Action Service Learning Club, and we require our students in our athletic programs to either participate in College Mentors or in the ProAct initiative. And in that, students not only bond together as a group, but they also participate in monthly community service activities. Junior Achievement comes in and they do different programs with us, helping us learn more about our community, but also helping us learn how to be more financially literate. We have student teachers from Indiana State University. We've also had some from IUPUI. We participate, or we are a part of, two neighborhood associations, the University Heights Neighborhood Association and the Carson Heights Neighborhood Association. But we are also very active in the South Indy Quality of Life Plan. I serve on the advisory board, and also I'm one of the Education and Workforce Development Task Force team members, and that involves 8 neighborhoods. So we are thrilled that we'll be hosting an event with Fifth Third Bank and South Indy Quality of Life next week. We have students that attend the Keenan Stall Boys and Girls Club and the Intercollegiate YMCA program at Laurelwood Housing. We also get fit, and we have Fitness Fridays where we focus on activities that are related to wellness and health through the Catch Wellness program. And this year we were thrilled to be awarded an Any Given Child Arts Grant that allows us to bring different performing arts as well as visual arts programs to our school, just helping students build another connection. And all of this is only able to be done through the hard work of not just myself, but my wonderful staff. And some of them are here this evening. And if it's okay, I'd like to recognize them this evening. So I'd like our staff to please stand. What I love about our staff, it's a little challenging sometimes when we have to close the building over breaks for cleaning, because they will say, Ms. Johnson, when can we come in? I say, okay, these are the days you can come in, but these are the days that even I am just allowed to work in my office and not go too many feet beyond that. So I want to publicly thank them. And I want to thank you for allowing me to share with you this evening. It is my pleasure to not only serve as an IPS principal, but I'm a proud IPS parent, and I thank you for that opportunity.
I might ask you to come up. There may be some questions. Commissioner Arnold?
How many students are in your school, and what's the grade span, and what is your percentage of free and reduced
We
lunch?
currently have approximately 240 students in our school. We are a pre-K through 6 building, and about 75 to 80% free and reduced lunch. It fluctuates every year.
Commissioner Denley?
Thank you so much. This is one of my favorite agenda items every month. I just think it's wonderful when we get to recognize our schools, and I'm so glad that you had a big cheering section come with you too. So it's wonderful that you were here tonight. And thank you for sharing. It just sounds like a lot of really good things going on in your building. One of the things that people are concerned about in general is that with the focus on I know your STEAM, which I was glad to see STEAM instead of STEM. But can you talk a little bit about how your music and art education works in your building? I know that we focus a lot on the academic subjects, but I have a soft spot in my heart for the arts, and so I wondered how it would work in your building.
I do too. So this year we do not have a music program, but we do have music embedded in other areas. So we have a teacher that works with technology. He also sometimes will share songs and have students doing different things that are related to stories or books with that. With our arts program, I'm thrilled to have my art teacher here, Ms. Nevius. She is outstanding. She not only provides art experiences within the classroom, but she is the one that is in charge of our grant. So we have been able to, so we're bringing in visual artists. Every week students get art at least one day a week. We are on a 3-day schedule. We call it red, blue, green schedule. So students get art every single week, and she does a lot with having them work with understanding not just the aesthetics of art, so the art of art, but also the science of art. And I've been in the classroom where I've watch them actually make paintings that they might see a Picasso make, or they're working on different activities and they're using certain shapes to actually build a picture. So we are working to ensure that we do keep the arts in, and that's why we applied for the Any Given Arts program. We had Dance Kaleidoscope come out during the first quarter. Students loved it, and right now we're in the process of writing some more grants so that we can have some other artists come out, whether they're visual artists or performing artists.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Hoops?
Thank you so much for being tonight, and also to your team for joining us. I would like to know what your capacity is. Sounds like you have 260 students, you said, and how many more students could you serve in this
I would
building?
love to get to 300, and we are recruiting every day and talking to parents and networking and working with parents. I'm on Twitter. I post on Facebook. I was updating some things on our website, and we'll be doing more of that because we can hold over 300 students. So we are working very hard to get to that capacity.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a quick question on slide 7 on your discipline. You've decreased referrals and suspensions by 20%. I presume that's not by accident. Can you tell us a little bit about the strategies behind that?
Okay, one of the things that we looked at is why were students being suspended, or why were they being sent to the office? Were they behaviors that sometimes we had maybe not addressed early on, or were they things that required some conflict resolution and just learning how to get along better with each other? So our teachers really did focus on having some morning meetings or talking about what are some things that we need to do. We had a focus on kindness. And we talk about, so even if someone is rude to you, you can still smile or just let it go and walk away. Teachers really worked very hard on getting to know their students and knowing if Lauren is having a bad day today, what is something that I can do to make her day better? Or does she just need a quiet place in the room to go to? So our students know that if they're having a bad day, when I was a teacher, it was called Siberia. If you want to go to Siberia, it's okay. But other teachers, they just have that spot that students know where to go to. Or if a student is having difficulty sitting down rather than getting in someone else's area, they have an expanded space or a space in the room where they can move around more. And then also, I'm a very visible principal. I know my students, I work with my students, and I tell my students my office is also a chill out place. So my students know that if they need a place to just come and just have a time to calm down, sometimes they're in there, I'm in there. I'll ask them if they want to talk, and they know if they don't, then we're just in there together, just letting each other know that we're going to be okay. So it's really about building strong relationships. It's also about establishing a culture where we are family and where we are a community, and this is just how we roll.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
I just want to quickly, I've worked with a lot of the organizations. I used to do a lot of work in your area, and I know that means a lot of these meet at night.
Yes.
And I just want to acknowledge how hard you work to be able to participate in all these community organizations, because I know that's above and beyond your regular school day. So I just want to thank you for making that kind of effort to engage in the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Again, thank you to the team as well with you tonight. Commissioners, the next report is our quarterly finance update. In the spirit of our efforts to be more transparent with our finances, the district provides quarterly updates on our actual and projected figures for the school year. Also, we provide updates on financial strategy. Tonight, Weston Young, Chief Financial Manager, will provide a quarterly finance update for the first quarter of the 2018-19 school year, which includes a status update on all district funds and other projects and priorities. With that, I'll turn it over to Weston to highlight first quarter of 2018-19.
Thank you, Dr. Farabee. Good evening, Commissioners. Same basic slide, but I've added something at the bottom. And so what we have is a focus. Commissioner Sullivan has talked about transparency. We're trying to make it easier for people to go to the finance website at IPS. So I'm going to ask Jerry to click on the link at the very bottom where it says, learn more about IPS financial reporting by clicking this link. So within our deck this quarter, I've embedded a number of links out to the finance website. So what you'll see here is where our financial reports will be, our student-based allocation is explained, and our school-by-school allocations are posted, and also some other information on how to get to some of the Indiana Gateway and Finance dashboards. So just wanted to highlight that. You'll see those embedded into our deck this evening. Great.
And that information is available for anyone to go see?
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent.
It may not be as good as Google, but if you Google Indianapolis Public Schools Finance, or it's the first pop up, Indianapolis Public Schools Financial Transparency, it pops up. I've tried that numerous times, and it works as well.
Thank you.
In the board appropriated funds, we have the first 3 months of the year. Just remind you, on the property tax funds, we receive those on a semi-annual basis. So you'll see the revenues really are just highlighting the general fund revenues, and none of the property tax revenues are reflected because we'll receive those in the second quarter. The general fund revenues and expenditures are in line with our budget. The general fund revenues are decreased from the prior year. You'll see that the general fund revenues for 18-19 are currently at 61 million, down from about 71 million last year. This is due to, in September of last year, we received our one-time inflow from the SCIPS sale. So we received $12 million up front at the beginning of last school year. That is the main difference in the revenues. From the capital projects expenditures, they're above pace for the quarter. This is due to our high school reinvention projects, our building improvements that we've done for the high schools. We made some significant payments in the first quarter, so the cash flow out of capital projects is more than originally projected. And then also our transportation funds, our expenditures there are much lower than budget, as our contractor has not billed for the services rendered for this first few months, and so therefore no payments have made and they're below budget. More information about each of these funds is in the appendix. You can see a lot of the current and historical performance of those funds. The next slide highlights the cash balances going back to June 30 of 2016. Us being on a fiscal year and being a school, we are highlighting our end of year balances plus the current quarterly balance. You'll see that the cash balance has ticked up this past quarter. That is due to the receipt of the general obligation bond proceeds that we had been talking about with the Finance Committee and the board for a number of months. We closed on that bond sale at the very end of September, and so we've highlighted that. The $34 million was received. It's in the line construction bonds. So our cash balance currently is $126 million as of the end of September 30. The treasurer's report, which is not necessarily in this board agenda item, it's in the consent agenda. Further details can be reviewed in that report. I want to highlight supplier diversity. For about a year, we've been highlighting the move that we will have to high school reinvention in the significant supplier diversity contractor Powers Davis joint ventures. We've seen how that contract has increased the supplier diversity spend year over year. So the first 9 months of the calendar year 2018, we are up to 16% of our total eligible expenditures to minority vendors, as compared to 11% year to date in the prior year. Again, when strategic opportunities arise, we really take an effort and engage those, and we have had, from Scott's work and the team with facilities, on budget, on time. And also want to highlight with our professional services agreements, they may not show up into these numbers, but when we have professional service agreements, such as our audit, we're external audit with BKD, there's a specific percentage that they've committed to doing that, and that's been a great a level of service that we've received from BKD, and they've been a part of that. And at the same time, as we've talked about refinancing our bonds, we also have a plan to require that as well. As far as budget updates, I wanted to highlight, there's the one side, the revenues, the other side, the expenditures. The highlight on the revenue is just to confirm what the dollar per pupil is from the state for the school year 2018-19. So that amount is $7,014, and this represents an amount that's 4.8% less than the amount that the IPS student received in 2010 and 11. At the same time, over those first 5 years or so, teachers remain static in their compensation. And beginning in 15-16, you'll see in the same year where a significant shift due to the legislative funding formula changing and impacting IPS. In that same year, the strategic plan was initiated, and also the first collective bargaining agreement with compensation adjustments and increases occurred. And that compensation adjustment and increase has occurred for the last 3 years. So the increase in cost of serving students over this time, inflationary cost of living adjustments happening, while at the same time state revenues being decreased has caused this lingering structural deficit. And this is why the main reason why IPS and our team vigorously advocates and seeks additional funding from our external stakeholders. On the expenditure side, last month, you'll remember hearing updates and highlights from 2 of our leaders in the newcomer program, serving the students of English language learners. Arturo Rodriguez and Jessica Dunn highlighted the important work that the newcomer program is doing, and also Ashley Calgar highlighted the Brain Institute, so how we're serving students with special needs. So we've highlighted those programs, but what I want to highlight here is that 10% of the general fund expenditures, so the revenue coming in, 10% of these funds go to fund the funding gap that is left between federal and state revenues and the cost of delivering the services to those in the special needs programs. So just want to highlight that as the expenditure side. We continue to advocate with legislative and community partners for the increased funding for special needs while aligning practices and staffing at appropriate levels to maintain quality and compliant service levels. As far as the 18-19 budgets, you'll see that a follow-up to our student-based allocation update at the work session earlier this quarter, or earlier this school year, we've highlighted that we have posted the school allocations at our finance page. Again, you can link right from that slide to our student allocation page. We've also highlighted that the fall adjustments due to the shifting student counts by school and across the district have been executed and are in place as of mid-October. Highlight for 18-19 is that budget managers are very cost conscious, at the same time focused on maintaining the essential services to meet student needs. Cash flow considerations for 18-19, so a couple items are still up in the air as far as what will happen. And so in the coming days and weeks, more will be known. And so the end result of bottom line projections and cash flow projections will be dictated by those events. So again, highlight the capital and operating referenda, ongoing collective bargaining compensation adjustments that may be in place, and then the health insurance renewal that we have been working on. The timing of cost savings initiatives that we've been highlighting over the course of the last few months that we've initiated. Then also the deployment and the use of those general obligation bond proceeds. Lastly, we're still committed to the strategic initiatives of the board, highlighting and supporting the move and shift to high school all choice initiative, and also just continued work on modernizing our systems and our processes to support an autonomous network of schools. The next slide is a financial reporting mandate update. And these mandates are in response to the markets being what people need and want in order to make informed decisions. So I want to highlight 3. We've highlighted these probably a few quarters ago, but this one, the generally accepted accounting principles, we've been on and off with statutory requirement of IPS to do this. And in this last quarter and in this last week, it's been actually fairly time-consuming within our team of receiving a directive from the State Board of Accounts. We're trying to clarify and understand what the directive is. And basically the directive is saying for 1920, we are directing you as a school district that's greater than 15,000 students, you will be issuing GAAP financial statements. And so we are taking that in, we're absorbing that, we're working with advisors. We realize, as the State Board of Accounts does and the legislators, is that bond markets have influenced the timing and legal necessity to have Indiana districts have GAAP audited financial statements in order to be legally able to issue bonds. So legally able to issue bonds in the future. The mandate will improve transparency for financial statement users, will provide disclosures adequate to provide complete picture of governmental units for investors and be more comparable to other state government entities. The piece here is that we have a great staff, and we've been making decisions for the last few years in preparation for this. And IPS has positioned itself to comply over these with the strategic investments in staffing systems and third-party advisory services. So just highlighting that as a state mandate, a market mandate. Federal rules have also been highlighted in the past, and this is school-by-school reporting per pupil. And so when we talk about the law is requiring all school districts to report per pupil expenditures at the school level. The Indiana school districts have been directed by the Indiana Department of Education. So federal law, but then every state has a directive of their own of how to do it. And so we've been working with them to modify our reporting of our financial activity on the Form 9. Again, a hyperlinked item there. Click on that. You see the most recent Form 9 for us at our school level. The mandate will provide a look back at the spending of a district. Well, because we've been positioning ourselves with the implementation of student-based allocation, we've been seeing it as an opportunity to be proactive, informed decisions that we're making. And so we feel very well positioned to comply with this mandate, and that's a federal mandate. Last mandate is the consolidation of local property tax funds, which begins in any fiscal year beginning in 2019. So every school district in Indiana has had the same board appropriated funds that we've highlighted previously in this presentation, but beginning in the budget development process for the school year 1920, we will be talking about this. And so the board has already received a briefing on this 2 times at 2 different finance committee meetings, and I think a number of the board was there. So those documents are available on our website to see what is coming down the pipe when it comes to consolidation of those property tax funds. IPS has advocated for that flexibility, and we're excited about this new opportunity, which hasn't been available before, to meet the needs of the students. Couple scenarios where, for example, previous capital projects funds, those revenues come in, they're restricted for only capital projects. Those can now fund anything that's operational. So for example, transportation. But also those cost savings in those previously restricted funds, if there's cost savings, those savings can actually be accumulated and then passed over to the education fund, which primarily pays for the staff and the benefits of those who are fronting and being right there in the classrooms and in the schools with the students. For 1920, again, our team is working on the 1920. We've highlighted SBA, student-based allocation, working on the pool, working on the weights, working on the formula. At the same time, a lot of, still some unknowns on that. Highlight again the referenda. At the same time, the legislative session starts in January, and some of the assumptions in those referenda and also just the day-to-day operations are contingent upon the next state biennium budget and what the funding formula is. So the question is, what will the state tuition support per pupil be? I don't know. I'm not going to know when I am talking to you about the budget development, but that's a big factor for us in the 1920 considerations. And then also, when will we realize the cost savings that we are working on? Highlight a couple of them being in the food service area, transportation, facilities, and just staffing capacity. Takeaways, wanted to highlight the work that we've been doing in the supplier diversity on the minority spend. We've increased that year over year. 18-19, some uncertainties at this point of the school year. More will be known there, but being very focused on aligning our revenues with our expenditures. And then also just the importance of our district continuing to pursue external funding to sustain both cash flows, both for the short term and the long term, to meet students' needs. This time, take any questions.
Commissioner Moore.
On slide number 3, your projections for 2018, 2019 for this period of time was 60 million in revenue, but it was up to 61, and that is due to what? Am I correct?
So 61 versus 60?
You projected, yes, the $1 million.
We could look at the expenditure analysis.
Oh, I was just trying to figure out if there was some unexplained revenue. I didn't hear you say anything about any additional sales. I was just trying to understand the difference between the 60 and the 61, because that's what we projected a budget to be at this time
Yep.
this year, right? And then my only other question was, looked like to me, if I'm looking at everything the same thing happened with expenses. So we projected we spending more, but we spent less. I mean, it's all positive. I'm just
Yep.
trying to understand the reason for the positive.
Yeah, so I would say for me, on the revenue side, there's an increase in the local revenue, so there's some interest income that's higher than originally projected for this quarter. On the tuition support, there are, for this quarter, additional students being included. So for example, there were a couple innovation partners that came in after the budget process that added a couple students. On the expenditures, I think it's just an element of timing. Sometimes what the first month of the school year, the first month of the fiscal year actually includes the contracts of the prior school year.
Right.
And then the startup is really 2 months of the new school year. So the budget cuts that we did in the spring and the summer,
Right.
I think played out here a little bit in the first quarter, and you're starting to see that on the expenditure side.
Right, I was just trying to understand and hope that we could expect to see this flow through the end of the year, like forecasted forward. So that's the only reason I was asking, if there was gonna be something positive to come out of all of this.
Yeah, I'd say right now with revenue projections, contingent upon ADM count, still finalizing that with innovation partners and the Department of Education. Collective bargaining is a key part of this. Referendum's a key part of it. A lot of things up in the air in the next 3 or 4 weeks that we'll finalize, and we'll, I think, in January have a lot more projection that is more precise and is laid out with a lot of student counts happening in the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I thought you was gonna say something like, IPS is, more children wanted to come to our school than we expected, and therefore we got additional revenue. That's what I was expecting you to say.
We don't know that yet, but we do know, as Weston highlighted, I think it's important for us to highlight is that we are seeing some of the reduced expenditures as a result of some of the efforts that we made in the spring and the summer to ensure that we control expenditures for this school year. We'll still continue to do that. I think we'll still continue to see some of that work. But in terms of revenue, I think that is going to ebb and flow throughout this school year. But again, the district is working aggressively to control expenditures. You can see, what was projected at about 71 million is down to 66, and we hope to continue that continuum.
Okay. So I just want to say that I'm very impressed with the fact that we continue to do the things we can to find efficiencies for our district so that we can move money into other places. I don't see anything wrong with us saying that. That's what we have done. I think we should toot our own horn sometime. And so I just want to say, I was anticipating what you were going to say, but I'm still very happy with what I just heard. And so I say kudos to you and the staff and all the work that you have done to try to ensure that our students have the necessary funds that they need to get a good education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hoops.
I wanted to go back to slide 8. You were saying the general obligation bond proceeds. So it's about 34 million. Are we expecting? Remind me if there's additional proceeds we are expecting from.
So we are not expecting more. What we have is we just received them, and awaiting some of the items to come up. So for example, referenda, bargaining. Are there opportunities for us to either deploy those in the coming months for projects, or are we going to need to fill in gaps with operations?
And then back on or forward to page 10, what's the latest on that food service waiver? Any update on that?
Yeah, so I met with the USDA leadership in Washington, D.C., Capitol Hill during fall break, and they expressed positive and favorable interest in us completing the process of application of waiver. So one, that they confirmed that we are eligible. They also appreciated the work that we've done for food insecurity and also reducing expenditures, but also maintaining quality and also the efficiency of our food service program. So I think from that conversation, one big takeaway is we probably have one of the most efficient and quality combined food service programs in the nation. And so we're continuing the next step of that process of application, which may require another visit to Washington, D.C., but it could be resolved anywhere from the next 8 to 12 months, we anticipate.
And my last question was just related to the gap. Obviously, you've been doing quite a bit of work, and you were saying working with consultants. The team has been preparing for that. Are you expecting to be ready before the deadline?
Yes. Yep. We've had calls probably a couple hours a day, and just setting the stage for working with the State Board of Accounts, the 9 other school districts, a lot of the CFOs. We met on Friday with the State Board of Accounts. It's a hot issue among business offices around the state of the school districts, and I think when it comes to who we've engaged and the systems we have and the staff we have, it's people are wanting to find out what we've done, and so those are my colleagues, and we're still needing clarification on a number of items. GASB will be quite a shift for State Board of Accounts and for the legislature to administer. At the same time, we are geared up to comply.
Commissioner Arnold.
Remind me, I know that the funds we get from property tax, there's a gap between, and I know that's the way when you pay taxes, like you're paying, remind me what that is, because I also know that what's projected, and then if people appeal with their tax, then it does that. Just give me a quick on kind of how does that fix into us getting the revenue that we believe we're going to get.
So are you speaking specifically on the operating referendum?
No,
No.
on
property tax.
the property tax money that we get for, I think, for capital and for
Okay.
transportation.
After it consolidates, or just in general?
Well, just in general,
Okay.
how there's a lag time
Yeah.
between when we need it and when it's actually available to us.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. So the bills that you or I, as a taxpayer, receive as a resident owner of our property, what we pay that year is what we receive this year. But the calculation of that tax rate is from assessed value and other, tax rate from a prior year. Is that so? What you pay today is what flows to the district or to the governmental entities that year.
But what's the timing of receipts of
Yeah,
dollars?
when do
We get it? So if you pay in April, we're getting a portion of those proceeds in April, May, and June.
But does the fact that if people appeal or people don't pay for whatever reason, does that
So that's-
impact what we get?
That's a lingering, true up at some point down the road. So if it's an appeal process that it used to take maybe this long, maybe it's taking this long, that's just part of the true up process. That it's not always I pay and that's exactly what the school district gets. There might be some people who aren't paying. There might be people who get an appeal, so we get less because of that decision that's 3 years in the making. There might be a tax sale, which I don't believe have been happening as recent as in the recent years, but there's the general property tax we pay, governmental entities get. Then there's a lot of activity that the city government and the governmental agencies are managing and monitoring, and those shift over the course of 6 months to 4 or 5 years, depending on how long appeals take and tax sales.
Does that negatively impact? I mean, if we think we're going to get, or do we take that into account that we're not going to get
what we think we're gonna get, or we're not gonna
So-
get it when we think we're going to get it?
So the biggest impact to what we have to analyze of what we won't get is property tax caps. Can't miss an opportunity to share that. At the same time, the amount of dollars when it comes to IPS district taxpayers paying the full amount that they're billed, we have a really good rate. Like, it's around the 99%, 100% rate. So what is billed, IPS and other, IPS Marion County districts, governmental entities receive basically all that money. That may not be the case around the state and in other jurisdictions, but we receive about 100% of it. So as far as the projections go, that's taken into account. It's analyzed, but that's something that if we think this is what the rate and the tax is going to yield, our advisors, the way we looked at it historically, we project 100%.
Good to know, thank you.
Just to follow up, we're still losing money because of tax caps, correct?
Yes.
And that's significant
Yes.
annually.
Yes.
Like, what is that amount? Do you know? What's
So-
it running this year?
So for the school year 18-19, I believe it's around the $13 million number.
Okay, and that's real money that we're not getting because of tax caps. And I think it's important for people to constantly be aware of that, because those are funds that fund transportation and capital and our debt service, and we have to pay debt service. So the funds that get hit the hardest by tax cap losses is transportation and capital.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Weston, today in a radio panel discussion, Denny with the Finance Association mentioned that the property tax cap only impact negatively about a third of the school corporations in the state of Indiana. Is that accurate? Have you found that?
I know that it has varying impact across the state. I'm not, I can't say that I have an understanding of how it impacts across the state.
But it'd be fair that it does not impact all school corporations in the same way.
Correct.
I think it's fair to say, I don't know the answer to your question with regards to 1/3 or 2/3. It's fair to say, because I think the impact of property tax caps have hit urban areas harder.
Yeah, I think that's
older areas, older neighborhoods harder.
Yeah, I think that's the point he was making. But thank you.
I have a question for Weston, if no one else has. On slide 7, just talking about the English language learners and the special education, it is also accurate, if I remember correctly, that we have a higher percentage of our students in ELL and in special education. So the underpay by the federal government and by the state government probably impacts us. It weights against us more than the average school system also.
Yes, and I think the number that's been the last couple of years is about 19%, I believe, and the state average has been around the mid 15, 16%. On ELL, I believe it's been in like the 13% range, and the state average being around 4%. I think what IPS has, that it's hard to get data on the intensity level of the special need. And if you were to call Brent Freeman up and the team to talk about that percentage, there's a lot of intensity there that is not understood just by a blanket special needs percentage. And I think with IPS having some key programs that are centrally located, that regionally we are the provider of that, those intensities really magnify into some of these. We get $8,800 or $9,000 for the highest intensity, but if you have a lot of those intense needs, those intense needs could range from $9,000, but they could also range to $35,000 or $40,000, and all you're getting is $9,000. So at some point, that increased intensity, I think Brent and the team could highlight really centrally located. IPS is a provider of those needs.
I believe Brent Freeman, Officer of Special Education, is going to provide an update and maybe as early as December on special education. I think we can highlight some of the complexities. I agree. The magnitude in which students have disabilities and require services is definitely unique to Indianapolis Public Schools.
I'd also highlight, I get contracts for service providing high intense needs. I don't know, probably every week basis. I see the costs of providing just 6 months of services to a student, and we're paying a fraction of that. So a lot of the dollars even going to service some of the special high intensity needs aren't even reflected in the school district Form 9's financial reports. I mean, there's state funding that's coming that state school districts don't report because it doesn't flow through it. But it's our kids, and Brent and the team, when they highlight, they can share about the excess cost reserve that the state has, and we take up a lot of that reserve, and that reflects on the intensity of the needs of our students.
$25 million gap.
I was just going to comment as a parent of a child with special needs that falls under the high needs is one of the reasons that we chose IPS is because we offer great service to our children. And I love to see that we're committed to ensuring that we fulfill every child's IEP needs, and some of them are extremely complicated. But when you think about where they can get their service, I think parents can know that IPS is where they can ensure that their child is going to have their IEP met.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And again, thank you for highlighting the information that's on the website. I do think it is, again, another unique opportunity for the public and community to see how each school is funded through our student-based allocation process. The next report, Commissioners, is an update on the district's work as relates to our racial equity initiative, and also our pledge that we participate in partnership with the Council of Great City Schools with other urban school districts across the nation to support males of color. Britt Freeman and Dr. Pat Payne will lead the presentation. It's always good to see you, Dr. Payne, and glad you're with us this evening. Andrew, got a pause, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Farabee, and good evening, Commissioners. First off, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present on such an important topic this evening. As a member of the district racial equity team, which you'll hear a little bit more about, for the past year and a half, this work has impacted both me professionally and personally in very impactful ways. So I want to thank you for this opportunity. So here's a quick overview of what we'll be talking through tonight. So with the objective of updating you on this very important and necessary work, and then also looking forward to define a framework for how we're going to continue to measure impact and progress. So first, we'll deep dive into the Racial Equity Initiative here at IPS, so you'll learn a little bit more about the why, the when, the what, as well as how this initiative has played out over the past few years across our organization. Then we'll take a broader look at some initiatives that Dr. Farabee just referenced relative to our Males of Color, which has been formalized as part of a pledge with the Council of Great City Schools. And then lastly, we'll do some forward-looking, some exciting things we're going to do to ensure that we can organize around impact. So I will turn it over to Dr. Patricia Payne, who is our Director of the Racial Equity Office now, and she'll dive into the Racial Equity Initiative.
I gotta talk. Racism. The belief that all members of each race possess characteristics or abilities specific to that race, especially so as to distinguish it as inferior or superior to another race or races. A doctrine or political program based on the assumption of racism and designed to execute its principles. Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Racism, a system of advantage and/or oppression based on race, social and institutional power plus race prejudice. One group having the power to carry out systemic discrimination through the major institutions of society. Racial Equity Institute Workbook, page 32. Racism, food for thought. Colorblindness will not end racism. Pretending race doesn't exist is not the same as creating equity. Race is more than stereotypes and individual prejudice. To combat racism, we need to identify and remedy social policies and institutional practices that historically and intentionally advantage one group at the expense of all others. That comes from the PBS website, Race, the Power of an Illusion. Good evening. Good evening, commissioners and Superintendent Farabee, administrative leaders, and community. On behalf of the IPS District Equity Team and our 19 equity schools, allow me to express our sincere thanks and deep gratitude for your foresight in approving, engaging in, and actively supporting the IPS Racial Equity Initiative. Few other school districts in this country have taken this increasingly important step to prepare us as employees and enable us to meet the needs of a complex and diverse student population, a step so needed in the toxic environment in which we and our students now coexist. Our partnership with the Racial Equity Institute, which began in 2015, has allowed us to receive the training and guidance needed to increase our knowledge, shift our thinking, elevate our understanding, transform our mindsets, question our negative assumptions, purge our corroded belief systems, and challenge our resistance to understand and accept the cognitive dissonance ever so present when truth replaces lies and reason replaces the insanity of doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And now that you've had time to look at this disgusting slide with dead and dying fish floating belly up in the lake, let me say a word about what you are viewing. These fish symbolize and are an analogy for what's happened and is happening to Black and brown students in this district and districts wherever Black children are. This is caused by the negative assumptions, the low expectations, the corroded belief systems that think poverty and low performance are synonymous, and by the embedded resistance to understand and accept the truth about why these lies and absence of reasons are not only necessary to the system, but also an intentional scheme. All of this and more make up the contaminated lake, effectively killing the spirit to survive, the will to learn, and the motivation to succeed in school and life. This slide is also an analogy for something else. We are so busy erroneously thinking that if we can just do something about these individual acts of prejudice and discrimination and negative stereotypes, that will solve the problem. But until we understand that the contaminated lake symbolizes the insidious racism that reshapes and reforms and transforms itself to sustain power as it systemically immerses and invades all institutions and structures to include education. We can do absolutely nothing to change this tide of neglect. So, commissioners, what we, in partnership with the Racial Equity Institute, are engaged in has, we believe, transformed the lives of over 1,500 IPS staff members from our 19 equity schools who have participated in the monthly intensive two-day 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. experience. This year, we will include high schools, bringing our number to 22 equity schools. Following each workshop, participants receive a comprehensive workbook. Improvement in academic achievement is evidenced, and we feel that the same progress will be realized in student attendance, discipline, suspensions, expulsions, and the disproportionate numbers of African American males housed in special ed. Okay. Our 19 equity schools are not left out. We don't just leave them out there to flounder by themselves. Each school has formed a school equity team. We call that the SET. Our district equity team, comprised of district and school-based leaders, have planning meetings monthly and partner with the school equity teams. Are there any DET members present this evening? Great. Very good. Thank you. For example, DET members Sarah Hutchinson, an IPS ESL coach, is partnered with Stephen Foster 67. This week, for their professional development day, the Stephen Foster equity team was in charge and planned an activity which included a presentation from me on racism. I only had 15 minutes to talk about racism. I didn't. But this was followed by the Monopoly game activity to demonstrate what happens when players aren't brought into the game until all the property and real estate has been purchased. We learned this through our training. They had 4 Monopoly games set up with team members at each table to demonstrate that even though you may start with the same capital, everybody gets $200, if you start late, you seldom catch up, which is the same thing that happens when laws and policies are intentionally put in place to prevent one group from having the same access and opportunities that are given to others. Following 30 minutes playing the game, discussion groups were led by the SET members. Kudos to Principal Deborah Pickett and equity team member Josh Swim, who is right back there also. In addition, on the first day of fall break, Monday, October the 8th, the district team planned and executed our first Racial Equity Summit and Community Conversation. It was amazing, even if I say so myself. Equity teams from each of our 19 schools spent a full day at Crispus Attucks for reinforcements from 8:15 to 4 o'clock with equity literacy specialist Dr. Paul Gorski, whose topic was becoming a threat to inequity in classrooms and schools, and rethinking poverty and education. Racial Equity Institute Director Dina Hayes also presented, as well as members of the district equity team. That evening, from 6:30 to 9 in the Central Library Auditorium, Ahmed Young, Chief of Staff, and Commissioner Gore joined us for a community conversation where over 250 community residents attended to hear Dr. Gorski and Dina Hayes, as well as a panel of distinguished educators from local universities. And our own Greg Newland and Tiana Davis were also on the panel. Our vision is this: an IPS community where student outcomes cannot be predicted by race or ethnicity. Something is very wrong when you know who's going to score at the bottom of the academic achievement scale even before they take the test. Something is very wrong with that, but this has been normalized because that's the way it's always been. Well, we're going to change this scenario. Our mission is to lead a collaboration of community members who will partner with IPS to improve outcomes for all students by eliminating racial disproportionality and disparity. We are blessed. We have some comments from some of our participants, and we are very grateful for that. And again, on behalf of our teams, both SET and DET, and our students and families, we thank you. And if you will permit me to do so, I'd like to conclude my part of the presentation with this poem. This comes from Rogers and Hammerstein, South Pacific. And it says, you've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are differently made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. Thank you. And now, Christine.
Yep. Go ahead. I'm Christine Rembert. I'm the very proud principal at Francis W. Parker Montessori School 56. And we have been a part of the race equity work in the district since the very beginning. For me, that flows really naturally out of who I am. I was born in December of 1969 in Los Angeles, California, and I was adopted by people that don't look like me in 1970. I was actually the first transracial adoption placement that happened in the state of California once it became legal to do so. So before the end of December of 1969, you couldn't place kids that looked like me with the people that raised me. It was against the law, okay? And so because of that, I have spent my whole entire life just being in the skin that I'm in, and people talked about race around me. It's been a fascinating kind of life to live. I spent most of my growing up time in Central Texas, where segregation practiced by race was heavily practiced regionally based on sort of where you lived. My dad tells a story about what happened, who I got to play with when I was in 3rd grade. Right? And he said, Christine, who do you get to play with who do you play with on the playground? And I said, well, Dad, I play with everybody. And he said, come on, you play with everybody? And I said, yeah. I said, when the white kids play and they won't let the black kids play, I get to play. And when the black kids play and they won't let the white kids play, I get to play, right? And then I get to high school, when the black boys date, and they date only the black girls I don't get to date. And when the white guys date only white girls I don't get to date. So it becomes a part of, it is a part of who you are, even when we don't talk about it, and yet my parents talked about race. It was a part of who we were, a part of our family. I integrated my family, and so that has changed the way that I see the world in a lot of ways. And I can't do anything except for lead the school where I'm privileged to serve, out of anybody but who I am. And so the race equity work is really natural. My husband and I have been married 20-something years, I think, at this point, and we have been lucky to adopt 3 children ourselves. We have a son who is 18, almost 19, I can barely imagine. And then we have twins who are sophomores in high school. And their educational outcome is directly proportional to the color of their skin. I have twins who split the genes, one who is blonde-haired and green-eyed, and he's in AP and accelerated courses, sets the honor roll, and is doing great. Don't have any concerns about that one. His twin brother, who shared a womb with him and shares a room, but not my womb, right? He has just gotten out of remedial reading classes as a sophomore in high school. And he's hued about like me. Our oldest son is the darkest among us of the 3 brothers, and he struggles in high school and has been very clear to say that teachers do not expect of him what he can do, and so he underperforms. At our school, Francis Parker, we are 72% black, 12% white, 11% Hispanic, and 4% multiracial. And in our staff makeup, this is really fascinating. For our certified staff, we're about 6% black, 76% white, nobody's Hispanic, and about 5% multiracial. But our classified staff looks a lot more like our students. We're 56% black, 30% white, 8% Hispanic, and about 5% multiracial. These numbers that I'm talking about don't mean, you saw the slide that Dr. Payne showed, they don't mean that our pond is sick, right? But they do mean that we have to be intentional about looking at our pond and making sure that it is not a toxic environment. We understand very clearly at our school that race silent does not mean race neutral. And so, when the opportunity to become a race equity pilot school came along, we got on board. I have 2 awesome teachers who are here, Tyler Roberts and Jennifer Wood. Wave, please, thank you. They are the leaders of our equity team at our school, and they are amazing young people in that they participate and they live fully into the work. Tyler comes by it really honestly. He's a Broad Ripple High School graduate, right? And he got to experience urban education as a student. So as a race equity pilot school, we have done lots of things. We sent everyone to training. We've had tons of discussions at our school. We have chalk talks where we talk about microaggression. We talk about race all the time. We talk about privilege. You'll hear teachers say, hey, you might want to check your privilege. And they don't get angry with each other. They begin to think about, oh, wow, maybe what I said really hasn't been respectful or really shows a lack of understanding. We did the IDI assessment with Dr. Payne. That's been really powerful. And we have hired specifically asking questions about race. So the third question we ask if you come to interview with us is, what do race and equity have to do with teaching and learning? Now, there's not a standard answer that you have to have. There's not a magical, 3 magical words that you have to say. But if you say something that indicates that you're not even able or willing to continue or be a part of a conversation about race, then it's probably not the place for you because you're going to feel very, very uncomfortable. And so we did all these things for staff over a number of years, right? And then we wondered together about what it might be like if we really took the race equity work to our students. And so last year, we had the One Book, One School project, and we read together this book, which is the 1990 Newbery Award winner by Jerry Spinelli, called Maniac McGee. And in this book, Spinelli weaves together racism and racial prejudice, issues of homelessness, what it means to be family, and issues of literacy, all together in this magical tale about this young boy that lives on the East Coast. We had other works like this one for our youngest children. They were reading about the Sneetches. And what we did with One Book, One School was we made sure that everyone was able to participate in the conversations about race all together, except for our littlest kids, pre-K and K. There are some themes in the book that are really not appropriate for those kids. So they're reading, reading and working with the Sneetches. We began the project really because of the race work, but also because we understand that kids don't catch the reading bug unless they love what's in books. And they don't love what's in books unless somebody reads to them, right? And so all the best pedagogy and best instruction, if you won't read on your own, it gets lost. So we said, hey, let's read to kids, and we did. And then we invited people from our not our congregation, it feels sometimes like that. We invited people from our community, and we invited families to have a conversation about the book. So our media specialist had written a Donors Choose grant, and she got copies of Maniac McGee, one for every family, and we passed them out at Pit Day, and everyone was reading. And so in the spring, then we got to talk about the book. And some of the most transformative experiences that I've been a part of happened when our young people led those conversations really organically about what was happening in the book. So I believe that what we did was that we made it okay to talk about race in the classroom across the school. And so at times when some student would get frustrated with something that a teacher had said, in the hallway during passing period, one kid would say, I just think they're racist. And the other student would say to them, well, they're not. Remember, it's the institution that's racist. The teacher might be racially prejudiced or have racial bias, but that's not really what we're talking about here. And you walk down the hall and you hear that sort of conversation and you think, oh, okay. Like they're getting it. The kiddos are getting it. At this time in our society, we are not post-racial. And our students understand that. At a time where some people say that we are, our kids realize and have experiences and fully understand that the students that look like they do and the students that look like the 3 boys that live in my house, not only are they post-racial, but people kill them because of the color of their skin. And so if we can't talk about what's happening to us in a really honest way, if we can't have not just an open dialogue, but a safe space for young people to engage in those conversations with caring adults, things won't change and our students won't be able to engage in the work of school. It's slow work. It doesn't happen magically. We've been working on it for quite some time. I have a little bit of data that's exciting to share. Some of it is embargoed, but we have seen an increase in our math ISTEP passing rate from 2016-17 to 2017-18. And across the school, our math pass rate rose about 2% for all students. And then when we get into that data a little more and we disaggregate and we start looking at what's happening for young men of color, we see that those boys passed from 16-17 to 17-18 at 7%, which is higher rates. They improved the pass rate higher than the rest of the students at our school. I can't say that there's a causal relationship between one book, one school, and our race equity work and our math passing scores. We didn't do one thing that led to that. It's all about the work that we did with curriculum and instruction and Nick and Kathy, and it's about creating a safe space and having support from the board, you all, from our academic improvement officers, from Dr. Payne and her group that have really led to change at our school. And I'm super excited about it.
Thank you, Christine. We're and I can, and as a testament to her hard work and the staff's hard work, when you go into her building, you just get a really special feeling about the inclusiveness and culture that she's been able to create. So I'm going to transition here a little bit for the next couple slides and talk about a Males of Color pledge specifically. So IPS is one of 62 urban school districts to enter into a pledge to adopt and implement initiatives related to the success and support of males of color. So this racial equity initiative is actually part of that. So this pledge is organized by the Council of Great City Schools, which we are a member of. And I just put on the bottom there some other districts that are included in this pledge. And again, there are 62 of them, so quite a large collective, which is really exciting. So what the Council of Great City Schools has done is they have listed a tremendous amount of priorities in this very long report that we've looked at. And so I've just highlighted a few of them here for you tonight. So that's on the left-hand side, left-hand column there. And then based on those specific priorities, some initiatives that we have going on in IPS. So these are very exciting, so I wanted to make sure that we updated you and called these out. So the first one, addressing chronic absenteeism, which we know kind of what the research says about chronic absenteeism, how that impacts graduation rates, how that impacts outcomes overall. And so we are tracking that systematically with consistent progress monitoring. Revised suspension and discipline policies. So I know that the board has worked very hard on updating the code of conduct to continuously engage with the community and with our staff to support some suspension and discipline policies, and then expanded AP and gifted talented programs. So there was a recent article that just came out and talked about how we've revised our screening process to have universal screening. So I think when we talk about equity, access is a really big part of that. And so that's exciting work. Expanding the FAFSA. So that is included in the 2018-19 superintendent's goals. And that is also intentionally tracked and now is very intentional work of our post-secondary readiness office. And then as you just heard, I think at the foundation of a lot of this is just discussions about race. And so continuing this ongoing partnership with the Racial Equity Initiative. So wanted to kind of look forward here a little bit and some exciting initiatives and touch points that we have coming up because as Commissioner Sullivan referenced earlier about continuous improvement, that is something that me and my team are very interested in and ensuring that we put in place some processes to actually be able to analyze this data as there is a lot of it. So the first initiative there is implementing a data warehouse, which will allow for us to track data across multiple sources. So right now that is difficult to do. So if you can imagine, assessment data is housed in one place, suspension or discipline data is in another. And so what a data warehouse will allow us to do is essentially it'll sit on top of all of those platforms and pull it all together, which will allow us to be able to really be specific about some of equity metrics that we're really interested in. So we're very excited about that. Intentional progress monitoring. So with this, better access to data, we want to be very intentional about what we're monitoring and when, and have very specific conversations about that. The review of the accountability data. So that is currently embargoed, as you know, but we are doing very specific and intentional review about kind of in a disaggregated way. So that way, when it does come public, we can share updates there. And then, continue to prioritize the Racial Equity Initiative that Dr. Payne has led for quite some time. So we are, as she mentioned, we have 19 racial equity schools, have some major transitions happening in our high schools, and so made the decision to add them into the Racial Equity Initiative, which is really exciting, and then ensure that all school leaders actually matriculate through this training. In the past, that's just been available for if you're a racial equity school. But now, we're going to take all our school leaders through that. So just wanted to update you on a few of those things. So we're happy to answer any of your questions.
Commissioner Hoops.
The Mail of Colors Pledge, we've been doing some of these activities already. Specifically, what does that entail? Obviously, they had guidelines, and we had already put some things in place. Tell me a little bit more about what that means to be a part of that group.
Yeah, so it's I received a report from the Council of Great City Schools a few months ago, asking to update our initiatives from a few years ago. And so what I did was went across the organization and said, what are all the great things that we're doing related specific to these priorities? And what that led us to do is kind of package all of this together. And I think from a universal perspective, here are all the initiatives that we have related to these priorities. So what their requirement is we just have to update them regularly on the initiative. And so that's what just happened. And I think that's what kind of spurred this conversation tonight.
So I assume some sharing of best practices, what's working, because obviously we're tying it to metrics and so on. that this group will be sharing so that we can learn from one another. Obviously, each community is unique, each city is unique, but I'm excited about the opportunity to share with one another about what's working and not working.
Yes, actually, interestingly, the Council Great City Schools annual convening is this week, and there was a follow-up session today to go in detail of some of the strategies that have proven to be successful with males of color, and then also the Council Great City Schools continuously collects data on urban school districts and their successes with males of color. So we had board meetings this week, so we didn't have an opportunity to participate, but it is something that we have regular conversation with our peer districts to learn what's successful, and also sharing strategies from IPS as well in our commitment to advancing outcomes for males of color.
On slide 10, you were talking about specifically reports on specific equity metrics. Tell me a little bit about what those are.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're having a lot of internal conversation right now about designing that. So how this data warehouse works is all stakeholders, so internally will get access to this from central office to principals to teachers. And when you log in, you'll actually be able to look at specific dashboards that we have the ability to set up. And so when we think about equity metrics, really we're thinking about disaggregation and the ability to look across multiple metrics, whether it be academics and discipline, attendance, and actually dive all the way down and drill down into the student level. So if I'm a principal, let's say Ms. Rembert, and she wants to look specifically at academic, let's say NWA data relative to males of color in her 7th grade math class. So she'll be able to do that. And then, let's say some questions that come up allow her to drill down even a little bit more, where she can actually go to the student-specific level. And so really, when we talk about equity metrics, we're talking about the ability to disaggregate and then ask some very specific questions about what that information means.
I look forward to seeing that at the district level so that we can see how we are doing and tracking and also learn from each other, right? Some of the schools may be more effective of moving that needle forward. So that's
Absolutely.
really exciting.
Commissioner Bentley.
I just want to overall thank you for the presentation and for your work on this. Dr. Payne, you've been doing this work for a long time, and I've been in this for 20 years. And it seems like this initiative is sort of the first one that's really continuing and building on itself. And and so kudos to you and your team. I've never heard so much positive feedback, I think, about the Racial Equity Institute and then some of the other work going on. And so, I really, you deserve a lot of kudos. I have this sort of a side question because, Principal Rembert, I'm a huge Montessori fan. And so I wanted to kind of get an idea, and I like hearing from somebody that's on the ground that's, taking what you're doing in the Institute and actually doing something in the school level. But I wanted to kind of get an idea of how Montessori, that philosophy, sort of fits with this, because I would think it would be a real good support for this work.
Sure, absolutely. It's just natural. It's the perfect marriage of the work and how we look at students. So the goal in the Montessori program, one program across 3 sites, is that every child gets what they need every day. But if you don't even understand that the pond might be sick, right, and that our own racial bias and where we sit affects how we see the child and their needs, then you cannot meet their needs. And so when a teacher comes into my office and says, I really think that I can't see what he needs because of who I am and where I sit and my own privilege, and she has tears, I say, what are we going to do about it? Now you know, right? You can't, once you have been told the truth, you have to react to that. And so I think it is perfect with Montessori, and it's as natural a thing as there could possibly be.
Commissioner Hoops.
I just want to also thank Dr. Payne and the team. I had an opportunity to attend the two-day workshop. I actually would like to do it again. I mentioned that to her. I thought it was just a top-notch, having been through a lot of professional development in my life, it was an absolute top-notch experience, and I learned so much from it. And the material that you went home with was also, I mean, you can go so much reference and resource in that. You can go, it's a lifetime to get through, you know, reading all that information and the books that are recommended, but it is well worth the 2 days. So I encourage, I don't know how many of us have on the board have attended, but I encourage everyone to make time for that.
I think just about everybody has been through it. But I just wanted to say, with all the experience that I have had with training, with going through training, this has been very different. It's almost like an accumulation of everything. And it helps you answer the questions that have been lingering. You know, like, why are black children always at the bottom? Well, you begin to see why, you see. So it's, I'm just so proud that our school district has taken on this initiative so that we can move beyond just food, fashion, and festivals, what people eat, what they wear, and how they dance. This is very different, so thank you for it.
If I might, as a point of privilege, by the way, I'm going through on, I think, the 14th and 15th of November with you.
All right.
But
Great.
just a moment, I don't want to drag this on any longer, but I'm just recently turned 55 years old, and I thought about this, and our ability to have adult conversations in the public square about race,
Yes.
about racism, about differences, has gone so far backwards in my 23 years as in the professional
Yes.
life. And it is something that, quite frankly, I got a little broken up because this is what we are supposed to do as a school system,
Exactly.
is to teach us and our kids how to have adult conversations about racism. And I can't thank you enough for the work that you're doing, and I can't thank the people with you for the work that you're doing, and I can't thank you enough for what you're doing for our kids, because we have to teach our kids because we've failed in our generation. So I can't thank you enough.
Thank you very much. I will share that. Any other questions?
But I will thank you. I think we have do we have a public commenter on this subject?
Yes, sir, we have a sign up. We also have someone who is here for general public comment, and there was a little sign up error, so
Okay.
we'll invite that person up next as well. First is Deborah Pickett, if present, to speak about this topic, and then we'll take our general public comment right after that.
Great. Thank you, and apologize to the public commenter for dragging them deeper into the agenda.
Good evening. I'm Deborah Pickett. I'm the proud principal of Stephen Foster School 67. And you heard Dr. Payne mention the work that my team presented on this most recent Professional Development Day. And what drove us to do that is I am a new principal to Stephen Foster. This is my second year there. And for me, it's imperative that we change the face of Stephen Foster. Our kids deserve it. We talked about those black and brown babies. Well, that's my building. And in order for us to help the kids get to where they need to be, I need to help my staff get to where they need to be in their mindset and just looking inward. You know, I said growth lies in transparency. And we have to be transparent about our belief system, because as the adults in the building, our beliefs are what drives our work with those kids. And until you know who you are and what you stand for, you won't be fully aware of how those things impact your work with the kids. And you come to work 5 days a week, and we talk about our data. Our data doesn't look the way that we want it to. We're making strides, we're making gains, but ultimately, it's in knowing who am I as an educator of these black and brown babies in my room that come here every day. Do I know them? Do I know their story? Can I empathize with them? If not, how can I reach them? I have to know about me as the teacher. So my team, and Josh here, he's also second year with me at Stephen Foster. And for me, The racial equity team was at Stephen Foster before I arrived there. But I know we don't have time to wait, nor do we have time to waste. We talked about that Monopoly game. You can start further back, and it's going to take you a longer time to catch up. My kids are worth it. They're more than worth it. So as a team, I'm supporting my teachers, my racial equity team in doing this work and helping the staff, helping the teachers to be comfortable in themselves and comfortable in saying, this is uncomfortable, but in order for us to grow, I've got to examine myself. So as the principal, I stand with my team. I stand alongside my racial equity team in doing this work. And from our PD, we have more teachers that want to be a part of the racial equity team. And that's just outstanding. They appreciated the opportunity to learn together. And now the thing is, we've got to transfer that to your practice in the classroom. You've got the learning, you've got the training, you have the knowledge. Now what are you going to do with it? I'm sorry, Josh, the time expired. He was going to speak, but Dr. Payne already spoke about what we did on Monday, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Payne, and everyone who's involved.
Why don't we go ahead and start the, go ahead.
That's fine.
No.
Please proceed.
We want you. I'm not ushering you off.
Okay,
We'll start the timer for you.
Okay. So like Principal Pickett was saying, my name is Josh Swim. I'm an English as a second language teacher, primarily working with the 6th through 8th graders in our building. I was introduced to the Racial Equity Institute last year, so this is my second full year teaching. I started in January 2 years ago. But I was introduced to this initiative, and it was something that I was already passionate about and became more educated about, and I'm interested in furthering this in our school. We had a great professional development with a few other teachers who are on the team that were unable to be here today, and with the principal as well. And we just got really incredible feedback. We're very grateful that Dr. Payne was able to come and share her expertise, her wisdom, her knowledge with our staff. And we already just had a survey that went out, and we had really interesting and really impactful feedback from our staff. And we're just very open to the ways that we can bring this into the classroom, get our students talking about this as well, and learning from them. Because we know that our students have minds that are brilliant, that have thoughts to share, and that we need to learn from them as well. So I'm just very grateful for this opportunity. I'm very grateful for a district that puts this as a top priority. I actually work with people, my friends around the country who work in anti-racist work, and when I tell them that our district requires our staff at our racial equity schools to attend this 2-day program, they're amazed. It really is something special that we have going on, and I'm very proud to say when I talk to my friends, when I talk to colleagues about what we're doing in this district, just to see how their faces light up and knowing that what we're doing here is impacting our children, especially our Black and brown students who face a lot of things, especially in this day and age. But we're just very grateful for this opportunity to learn more and to make real gains and really challenge kind of the face of inequity in the school system and society at large. So thank you so much.
Now, Ronaldin Cornett, please.
So I think I'm only going to be up here for 1 minute and 13 seconds is what I timed. So I'll just probably talk for a little while just to keep my whole 3 minutes. I'm just kidding. Good evening, School Board Commissioners and Superintendent Farabee. I want to make it official. As you know, I'm Ronaldin Cornett, President of the Indianapolis Education Association, the exclusive representative of the Indianapolis Public School Bargaining Unit. Tonight, I would like to share our support for the IPS referendum. This past spring, I sent out a survey to all the members of the bargaining unit about the referendum. Of the bargaining unit that completed the survey, 73% lived in Center Township, including myself.
The majority of the certified staff that completed the survey support the referendum as Center Township citizens and believes IEA should also. IEA supports the IPS referenda because it is what is best for our students, keeping our class sizes low, maintaining neighborhood schools, and retaining the great teachers we have in IPS. IEA knows that the students' learning conditions are the teachers' working conditions, and the passing of the referendum will be a great start to achieving this goal. Thank you.
That's it, sir, for this topic. We have one more this evening, but on a different topic.
Thank you to the commenters, and again, also for Dr. Payne, and also Andrew. It's great to hear from him on our pledge, and also principals and staff that are leading this work. Really excited about where we are, knowing that we still have a lot more work to do. The next update is a briefing on where we are with our pilot with Indigo providing transportation for our high school students. Scott Martin will share where we are and what the next steps are and ridership thus far for the 2018-19 school year.
Good evening. Just want to go quickly through this to give you kind of an overview, how it started, where we're at, and if we should decide to expand it, what that may look like. So these are numbers from August. You can see that there was over 1,000 student trips taken in August, most of them Monday through Friday, a few on the weekends. The passes that we distributed are good for 7 days a week. If you look, the graph at the right shows those routes that they most usually traveled. The heaviest route by far was Route 39, which starts at Midhofer on the east side and uses 38th Street to Meridian, and then comes down past Shortridge to downtown. Again, so that's twice the trips that anybody else took. The second most one was Route 8, which again starts at Midhofer on the east side, but uses Washington Street to come downtown and then out to the west side. The third most heavily used trip was Route 38, and that again uses 38th Street, but starts out at Eagle Creek and comes to Meridian, past Shortridge, downtown. So those were the three highest, most used routes that students utilized. So we started a pilot with Indigo, and I will say that there is someone from Indigo here with me this evening to answer questions later on. He can clean it up for me. So we started the pilot in May 1st, and it went through August 31st. We got 500 passes originally for the flat fee of $5,000. Originally, those all went to Shortridge, but in June we decided to take some of those and give those to Tech. Unfortunately, those passes didn't get used that went to Tech, so they were primarily used at and by Shortridge students. We also gave passes to staff and parents so they could ride it and see what their student experience would be like. If a student wanted to ride Indigo, there's a couple options that they have. One is their Indigo website or the phone app, so they can determine what route is most applicable for them. The good thing is that on most routes, if they do miss a bus, there's another one coming behind it in 10 minutes. So out of the 400 passes that were distributed, 253 of those were used at least 4 times. So students at Shortridge did use the bus, and successfully is the information that I've received. We do have an opportunity to expand the pilot throughout the rest of the school year, 500 more passes for $5,000. Our initial thought was that we would split those between Shortridge and Tech to get some more data on how it works for students and if they'll use it. We are developing, should we decide to expand the services at some point in the future, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but we wanted to go ahead and start working on some criteria for students on how we would look at it from a district perspective and what we would expect of students. So the first one is that we would set a mile walking distance to an Indigo bus stop. Second would be that there would be less than 2 transfers from their home or their first stop to the school. And that a bus would at least come every 30 minutes, and that travel time would not take more than an hour and 20 minutes. So as we start to build some criteria, we can start to see how many students we could serve. This is a scattergram on if you look up at the in this zone right here, you can see that they're very tight, and that it works well for the routes that are available in that area. What that shows us is that all the students in that area for high school live within that criteria that we set. One thing I do want to make clear is this is not for all high school students. So we still are required to transport students that have IEPs or homeless. So you'll see in the next one where that comes into play. But this would be for those students that don't have those qualifications. As you can see actually those are even outside the I-4 or 465, but those are still our students, and they may be homeless, so we would need to provide those services for them. As they get farther out away from the city center, the likelihood that there's a route that fits that criteria that we developed gets less and less. It's really small up here. So we've set some, again, going down through the criteria, what we just talked about. If we would decide to expand the use of Indigo, it's certainly contingent on the capacity of Indigo and when that timing would take place. All high schools will have students that can utilize it. It's our goal to make that available to as many as want to. Students from across the city use Indigo. We could disseminate those passes earlier so that they can use that for the weekend or for weekend jobs or after school jobs. So again, should the district decide that we're going to expand it, this would be our next steps. We would continue to map out all of the students and against the Indigo routes across the city. We train students and parents, and then at some future date, we would notify them. So I do have a representative from Indigo here. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take those and refer those to him. Yes.
Commissioner Moore.
Okay, so we're saying the 253 of our students took the pass, right? And that they rode 4 times? 253 average?
Yes. 253 of those were used at least 4 times.
At least 4 times.
Yes.
And so we had it from May until August 31st, and school
Correct.
was out roughly the 1st of June.
Right.
My question is were those 4 rides primarily during the school year, or was it after where the kids were doing whatever they do in the summertime?
Primarily, there's an appendix on here that does have that breakdown, which is July. And most of those trips were, so what I showed you was only August, the 1,000 trips that were taken. So it doesn't really break out the 253 versus what days they rode.
Okay, so you're saying it was after school started back? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that I can't disseminate when those 253 were used. Yes.
What happened with TAC?
There was a change in leadership at the end of the school year, and they did not get disseminated.
Okay, because I mean, that's just frustrating. So,
Yes.
I mean, maybe we should pick another school to be the pilot or.
I'm pretty confident that Mr. Franklin
Okay.
would utilize those passes.
Okay. Because I know that, I mean, at the time, it was the school that asked to be part of the pilot, I thought.
That's
but,
correct.
You know, that is unfortunate. But
Yeah.
I just, I wanted to talk to Indigo or just ask them how they're feeling about their capacity. I know that when we had the preliminary conversations, you know, we were talking about, you know, different routes and the capacity of those routes, and I just wondered if you guys were on, you know, on, as far as the timeline, how that was going from your end.
Yeah, so I'm Brian Llewellyn, Vice President of Public Affairs with Indigo. Thank you all for the support and the opportunity to speak with you all. We have worked with the Transportation Department and leadership at both Tech and Shortridge. Those 500 fare cards and the program continuation with those 500 students, we definitely have capacity to manage that level of growth. We are implementing Red Line Rapid Transit Service that will travel from Broad Ripple down to University of Indianapolis. At the same time that we open that service in the early fall next year, probably end of the summer, early fall, we are reconfiguring the bus network, and we will operate a frequent grid of services all across the city. So there's a 70% increase in service overall. So we're expecting that that will all be coordinated and open about the time that school starts next year. At that time, we will have much more capacity to talk about a larger program, and the continuation, or the discussion we've had about continuing the program with Manny and his team has really been an incremental approach, making sure that we can continue to support those choices that individuals are making to use the service, and then at the time that we can scale up a little bit more next year, we'll have the capacity to do a much bigger program.
I mean, I feel really, I thank you for all your work on this, both IPS and Indigo, because I think it's long-term, it's going to be a very valuable partnership and service to our students. I had a question for, about that mile, you know, the parameters you're setting. How far do high school students walk to a bus stop now? Is it a mile?
I think it's a mile and a half.
It's a mile and a
Yeah.
half, okay. So we're not changing the parameters that we currently have as far as distance to a bus stop.
So if you recall our discussions in the last year when we were talking about going to the two-tier, that we actually expanded the high school or to 7/10 of a mile to, from their home high school or their boundary high school if they were going to one of the other high schools. So right now they're walking at least 7/10, but if a tech student, if that's their boundary school, they could be up to a mile and a half away.
Okay, and then if they are outside of that parameter, we would continue to operate yellow buses.
Yes, we would.
For those students that there just isn't a nearby bus stop.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Moore, do you have a question? Commissioner Hoops and then Commissioner Sullivan.
I have quite. I realize you said we're getting ahead of ourselves, and so these are just some ideas that you have about criteria. So, are you saying, as part of what you were sort of thinking at this point, that if a student met this criteria, then they would not ride a yellow bus, or are you?
That's correct.
Or you're recommending that the parent would have an option of the Indigo or the.
No, if we would expand it, we would want to reduce yellow bus, so we can get our costs down.
Right.
I think, but there's also a cost to us to provide the Indigo passes as well. So we couldn't absorb both. So the thought would be that if you live within that zone and you meet that criteria, that you would ride Indigo and not the yellow bus, unless you qualify.
Those other two categories.
Yes, correct.
But that is not a decision you're suggesting yet.
That's not a decision I'm
Just wanna-
recommending at this
Just
time.
want to clarify, yes.
Yes,
No,
that's
I
correct.
realized that you were saying that you were getting ahead of yourself, but I wanted to figure out what you were.
Yeah, that's what it could look like.
Yeah.
Down the road. Again, thank you,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
I
am not.
Less has been said and headlines have been written, so I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, I'm not recommending that. That's not where we're at this point. But if we did choose to expand that, then that could be the criteria that we use.
Commissioner Sullivan.
So that answered one of my questions, and the other one's for Indigo, and I probably know the answer to that too, but because it's a relatively small number of students who participated in the pilot, but did you get any feedback from any of your people? Did they notice that our students were riding their buses?
Yeah, we've gotten a little bit of feedback from the operators, and I think probably the more noticeable influx of students is through the Purdue Polytechnic program that we have. So this is the second year that we have a student-wide program for their students, and they increased from 150 students to 300 students. Those individuals have taken almost 11,000 trips this school year alone, those 300 individuals. So yeah, we're working with our operations department and training, our security officers at the transit center, our customer service folks. Students are becoming more and more used to using the system, and we're seeing more and more of them, so we're getting used to them being around.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Moore.
One last question. So what's the longest length of time a student's on a bus right now?
Our goal is an hour. I think last year was an hour and 2 minutes. That would probably be an average. We have some that, because of the distance that they travel, that are on the bus longer than that time frame. I would say they could be on the bus up to an hour and a half at this time, depending on where they live and what school they're going to.
It's a long time.
Certainly like to keep it shorter as possible.
But Scott, I think in those scenarios, there may be some extremes where we have students, if they're under the homeless status of McKinney-Vento, we're taking them further distance outside of our boundaries. So I want to be clear that hour and a half is not the norm for transportation for our students.
That's correct. Unfortunately, we don't separate them. So those I'm referring to all situations.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hoops, you have one more.
So what is the schedule that you're recommending? I saw that training of parents, when would you?
So that would be, should the district decide to move that direction at some point, that would be where that would fall.
Commissioner Arnold.
Is the pilot still going on at Shortridge? Are there still passes for current Shortridge students?
It ended August 31st. So this would be, should we purchase those passes, it would start now and go through the end of the school
Right
year.
now, all of the Shortridge students
They're on yellow bus.
potentially rode Indigo. Have we heard any of those families or those students wanting to?
I'm not aware of any requests, no, but there may be, but I'm just not aware of them.
And this is just another transportation question that I know part of the plan with the 4 choice high schools was that students could go to a high school as their bus stop and get picked up and taken to another high school.
That's right.
How is that working out? Are there many showing up and doing that, or?
Yes, there are. There have been very few issues with that.
I just thought that was an interesting concept that a student that lives close to Washington could get the bus there and travel to Tech or
Yes,
Shortridge or wherever.
it helps us be a lot more efficient, definitely.
Thank you.
Commissioner Finley.
I just go back to when we had an initial conversation, we were at Purdue Polytechnic talking about this. And I just remember the compelling comment that Scott Best made, that with Indigo, if a student misses the bus, they just get the next bus and they might be a little late. But if a student misses a yellow bus, they miss school. And I think that's really important for us to continue to think about, that this really could potentially be a better way of serving our students and making sure that they're not missing school because they've, missed the bus.
Right.
So, thank you.
For clarity's sake, are you seeking a sense of the board that we should extend a second?
Yes, yeah, I think I would like to have that, just kind of head nod that says, yeah, it's a good idea, we should continue.
I see heads nodding.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask for that, and also on the Indigo side, for clarification, for fall of 19. That includes what we see today in the construction on Meridian, that at that point, we would have the lane in the middle for the rapid transit, and then the 2 lanes for drivers. Is that what you're communicating?
Yeah, so we're anticipating that next year, around the time that school starts, construction will be finished and the bus rapid transit service will be operational.
Gotcha. So everybody in Meridian should get used to the current
The other
2-lane
street I need to
structure that we
avoid.
have
That's
today.
That's right.
All right, thank you.
I live right there.
Thank you.
Commissioners, the last update is a follow-up to the discussion we had with commissioners and the high school principals regarding graduation sites for the class. I'm sorry, did I skip one? I'm sorry, innovation update. I was moving too fast. I think we have, do we have public comment? Okay.
So we'll take that after presentation.
All right. Jamie Vanderwally will present an update which includes some revisions to the timeline as a result of some of the delays with reporting of performance data, and also provide an update on schools that have or partners that have expressed interest in a innovation agreement. And then we also in the timeline outline our process for recommending interventions. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. As Dr. Farabee said, just here with a quick overview of the letters of interest that were sent to us for the 2019 school year for interested innovation partners, as well as some shifts that we've made to our restart timeline specifically, should we need to have a restart school for 2019. So I'll just start with a quick reminder of why we instituted this process and continue to refine it. We have 2 primary goals. The first is to make sure that any innovation partner is very carefully vetted by a truly cross-functional team within IPS. And the second is to make sure that we continue to gather significant community input throughout the process. Also, as a reminder, there are 4 pathways through which one can become an innovation network school. The new school, that would be not a charter school, but a school that exists for the first time in an innovation agreement. We have 2 of those, Thrival and Imadon Elementary. Then conversion, restart, and charter partners. When I go to our letters, you'll see we did not receive any letters of interest for that first pathway, but we did receive several for the second, third, and fourth. So here you can see the list of potential partners for 2019. These are folks who submitted letters of interest. I'll just do a very quick rundown. So the first is KIPP Indy Legacy High. As you know, the KIPP K-8 program is already an innovation partnership with the district. KIPP will be opening a high school in 2019, and they would like to do so within the IPS Innovation Network. Next, you see Purdue Polytechnic High School North. That would be the second location and complement to the downtown location that is also already in partnership with IPS. Phelan Academies of Indiana. As you know, Phelan operates 2 of our innovation schools, School 93 George Fisher and also 103 Francis Scott Key. And we are exploring the possibilities, as are they, of bringing the existing charters within the city also within the network. So they have 2 other schools within the city that are charters, but not innovation schools. Tinley Accelerated Schools, you're probably also aware that's a network of 5 schools, about 1,600 kids within the city. They're exploring, and they have an interest in just seeing if it would be a good fit to come into the IPS Innovation Network. And then Invent Learning Hub would be a new charter school. That's a slow grow charter that is proposed. It would be a K-4 next year and probably on the south side, but there's not a location settled yet. When it comes to letters of interest for schools that are interested in converting, and as a reminder, that's where the existing IPS principal and staff have their own initiative and are interested in moving the school to innovation status. We got 2 of those, Arlington Woods School 99 and George Buck School 94. And then we have 3 interested parties who, if IPS does determine that a school should need to be restarted for 2019, 3 parties who may be interested in doing that. The first listed is the Pass School. That's a new charter. It's an individual going after a charter school, or charter rather, K-8 with the mayor's office. They'll actually have their hearing mid-November. And then 2 existing charter networks within the city that also were interested in joining their networks, as I mentioned above, Tinley and Phelan. So when it comes to the timeline, you'll recall I shared a very similar looking slide in July. In July, I expressed that there were really two pathways that we were looking at, 2 timelines rather. The first was everybody that's not conversion, And then the third column in July was for conversion. Our timeline for conversion schools will not change. So that's Arlington Woods and George Buck. We still will get their full application in the winter after the holiday break, take them through their intensive process, mostly during that second semester, because they're right now engaging with their schools and their communities about this possibility. Also, folks who are interested in a charter partnership, that timeline is not changing. We expect those full applications on November 1st, and we'll start to interview them more deeply after those are received. So the changes I'll discuss tonight are primarily for the restart only, and the reason for that is, as Andrew mentioned when he was up here, there's been a delay in receiving the state test data. Is currently embargoed. That's the data that we use to determine which schools will be eligible for a school quality review and SQR, and hence when schools may be recommended for a restart, and so we've had to push all of that back while we wait for the state to lift the embargo. So on the timeline, we went ahead and did interview everyone who submitted a letter of intent. We finished those up this week. Got some feedback from the team there, so there was no change there, and as I already mentioned, no change with wanting that full application, the first part, from everybody on November 1st. Except conversions. We're not talking about them right now. We did push back when folks would also introduce themselves to the board, so instead of doing it this month, we're looking at now November or December instead. As I already mentioned, we did have to shift back the school quality review timeline, so previously we had hoped to be able to announce which schools would be up for that in September, but now it's going to be mid-November when that embargo is hopefully lifted by the state, which means they will then be performing our school quality reviews after Thanksgiving, but before the winter break. So we'll be making any recommendations if a school is recommended for a restart the week before that January board meeting. So tentatively, that's January 25th, which then anybody who is interested in putting in an application to restart a specific school would have about a week to produce that second part of the application that's tailored to that school. That then gives us a little less than a month to do the matching process, so that's more compressed than we originally imagined, which means we're thinking even more intentionally about the community engagement process there, meeting with the schools, introducing the applicants to the schools, all of those pieces. And then we'll be continuing to interview folks, though, all the way until that mid-February timeline. So we haven't slowed down our vetting process. It's only when we get to if we recommend a school for restart, then what that continued vetting and matching might look like for that applicant who would be interested in restarting that particular school. Our hope then would be to make recommended matches to the board in February and have contracts done in March. So that's all I have. What questions do you have for me?
Commissioner Hoops.
I have a question about the restart possibilities. You're waiting for the data that's embargoed, and you're thinking that it will be released when?
November 14th is when the state is supposed to lift the embargo, so fingers are crossed.
Right.
Yes.
And so, there's I'm sure assumptions around, there's sort of the high probability that how should I word this? That when you're looking at those schools, like what is the likelihood that we'll restart them? Because you can make some assumptions around how much, the probability of a school making that jump, whatever significance. We're not looking at actual data that you're sharing right now about the restart schools. Like, what is the probability of, the restart? Because you're going to make that decision on the data, correct?
Right.
I hate to wait so late in the game about it. I'm hoping I'm making sense with the question I'm asking.
You are. I think we have a sense again of what we receive that's embargoed of schools that will be potential candidates, but we also want to honor the school quality review process, which is the qualitative side.
Right.
And so I think that is where I believe that we just can't rush that process. We need to ensure.
Right, but I'm just saying if you have an F grade and I'm waiting for that second test, the probability of me actually getting an A+ and really making a huge change is very unlikely. And so I just feel like we need to have real conversations now because the timing is so short, and there's the key part here, I think, in the success of a restart for me is the community engagement, the family engagement. And so, are our families aware of we're waiting, in this information, and so on? Because I've been concerned in the past that it's been so rushed. And here we are again. Obviously, things are beyond our control because the state has embargoed the information. But, let's look at, at the data here and see, what is the probability. Let's have these conversations earlier than later.
One thing I would just add, Commissioner Hoops, I think you are right in terms of that timeline, and it's been a point of angst for us as we've thought about what makes the most sense. I think because of the way for our school quality review, our lens is not just based on letter grade, and so we're looking at both, proficiency and growth, and so that data is so critical because if a school is on the right trajectory, we want them to be able to continue to do what they're doing, and if we find evidence that that growth is lacking, and then that's when we need to go in and sort of figure out what are the differentiated supports or interventions that are needed. So without that data, we really cannot say this is what we think, even if a school has had, 2 or 3 F grades, they could be, sort of starting to climb out of that and doing well from a growth perspective, and so we don't want to discount that. So it is frustrating, and we were very frustrated when the state's timeline got pushed back. We also, to Dr. Fairby's point, want to honor making sure that we're getting a full picture of what's happening in a school.
Commissioner Arnold.
And looking at one of the goals is the including significant community input. Where on this calendar does that take place? Because it looks like the schools, or the schools to be restarted, aren't announced till January 25th. Then they're doing the application, and then the matching process only goes to February 22nd. It doesn't seem to me like that's a long period of time to glean that community and parental input.
Yeah, you're right. I think the other thing I would add, just piggybacking off of the answers to the last question, is that part of teeing up the school quality review process does also include family and community staff input. So we're trying to be very clear that school quality review does not mean that you're going to be restarted. And that's been a difficult distinction to make because folks can see, the pattern that has existed. But that part of, getting in a school quality review is to make sure that we're listening to parents and they're also and community members, families, they're also understanding what the data shows. And so, I even see that's part of us starting to get our heads around and develop that rapport with the community so that if it is determined that a school is eligible for restart, we already have that beginning to build. So I think then to specifically answer your question of zoom in on there, I'd be happy to build the calendar out further for you as well. We'll be sharing the information publicly if a school is recommended for restart on January 25th. We would hope to internally have that discussion and make the decision a little earlier because we want to be able to start having those conversations with principals and school communities clearly before it goes public. So we would build ourselves in hopefully 2 weeks, 10 days before that date to start the conversation. And it would look similar to what I described when I was here in July, where first the district goes in, has the listening session where we talk about the decision, what it could mean for the community. They start to tell us what they want for their schools. And then we bring the applicant second to start those dialogues. So the same process, we will just have to meet more frequently or closer together.
It needs to be genuine community input. I appreciate the fact we're talking the talk, but we absolutely have to walk the walk because we get more criticism from that parents don't know, they don't understand. It's very traumatic for families for this to occur, and I just hope that we do due diligence. I'm glad to see it's part of the plan. I just hope that we follow through and ensure that the wheels are turning and we're getting that input.
Commissioner Sullivan.
I do have a problem with this. And I think that I would prefer to put, this is an anomaly in terms of the timing for the release of these scores, and it's like we're building everything around that. And so while I respect the integrity of the process we've laid out, we're asking kind of the wrong people to absorb the impact of the lack of timely data. And I would prefer to have, as Commissioner Hoops had, assessment made by the people on the school quality review that finds other criteria to use because we don't have the growth data. I have to believe if the schools if they really haven't gotten their act together and they're not showing progress, that you're going to be able to see that, whether you have that growth, how precise that is. So I just have a problem with that kind of falling more on our families and community side of things than it does on our own staff. And again, while I respect that we're trying to have this consistent process, consistency doesn't trump professional judgment, and we're not looking at a huge number of schools. So I would like to talk about that a little bit because I do find it problematic.
Commissioner Bentley.
Remind me again what the criteria is for a school that wants to convert. Because I know had some concerns last year when we were allowing some conversions with schools that had not shown that they were performing well. And so I'm just wondering what we're looking at here as far as conversion.
So coming into this year, we did add an additional layer of using what is our newly developed principal competency framework to assess the capacity of a leader to take their school to innovation status. It's something that we had just been developing last spring, didn't have it ready in time to sort of layer that onto the process. So we'll start by analyzing their application, their school design, just like we would for any of these, and just see sort of how well it's all built out. And then we build our interview questions first around that. Then, like I said, we're using data from the principal competency framework, getting input from the current school supervisors, looking at the will of the staff. And we did, as I also mentioned in July, add to the process this year. We'll do focus groups and listening sessions within the buildings of conversion schools this year as well. That's something that we hadn't done before. We'd sort of reserved that for restart, but we recognize that the need to get that fuller data picture about the school culture was necessary in all kinds of innovation changes. So we don't have a set like, oh, the school has to have had, an A for 3 years or any of those things. I think particularly as we see this could be a lever for change within a building. And if the leader is ready, that it may be what the building needs.
I mean, I bring it up because I just did a quick cursory look at these schools and they're just not performing well. I mean, they are rated really low on not only the state's ratings, but some of the other rating, great schools. And so I mean, I'm just concerned about that. The other thing is I think some of the initial conversions, there was a lot of staff buy-in, and there was a significant number of staff that ended up staying with those programs. But it just seems like, last year that wasn't the case. And I think, we've got to, consider what, how that impacts the district as a whole. When, if a school's going to convert to a innovation school, and they're wanting to do that to continue the work that they're doing in their building, and then virtually everyone in their building leaves, and those were the people that the families and the community had a connection to. I'm not seeing that as a positive, to be honest. And so, I think I just want to make sure that when we're looking at conversions, that we're looking at that we're looking at people that have proven track records in good leadership, and schools that are on a trajectory of improvement, because I don't think that's been the case in the past, and it's been pretty frustrating. So that's all I have to say on that one.
Commissioner Moore,
Kelly said everything I was going to say.
Commissioner Hoops.
Yeah, I was stuck on the restart and didn't have a chance to talk about the conversion myself. I would like to see a conversion criteria that we would have an opportunity to. I don't recollect sort of an established criteria that we take a look at, because I think it's important that schools who are considering it, that they understand what that looks like. And I'm also interested in seeing the leadership framework. I don't recollect reviewing that, because I'd like to take a look at what has been established as criteria for evaluation of a leader.
Can we get those to you?
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, just and also a quick recommendation when you do the focus groups for the schools looking at conversion, that you make sure that you reach out to any staff who leave in the prior to the request for conversion, but under that leadership, because you might miss some of it might kind of have an artificial sample if you miss those people. And I know if they don't work for us anymore, that's kind of hard to do, but I think it could be really good information.
Commissioner Hoops.
And then with regards to charter partners, I don't have the history of or know the history of the charter partners. So assuming when there is a recommendation that we'll get some of that information that kind of summarizes their performance and the types of population that they've served and sort of all those specifics.
Absolutely. Tentatively, the plan now is to have them come and introduce themselves to you starting in November, and then their applications will also detail all of that. We ask for that specifically. What is your performance data? Who do you serve? What are your subgroup performance? All of that. And those become public records, so we can send those as soon as we get them.
Yeah. I find oftentimes that there's not a level of consistency of these presentations. And I think maybe as a board we can decide what are some specific things that we want to see addressed at the presentation. Of course, there's the detailed material that you referenced, but there's a certain level of information that for ourselves and for the public that we consistently see when there's a presentation around charter partners or even conversion and so on, so that we are making sure that certain things are reviewed and also we have an opportunity to discuss those.
Commissioner Arnold, then Commissioner Ben.
As part of the conversion application, are there questions related to why they want to convert? What, I guess I'm not sure what would motivate a school to want to convert to innovation. What benefit would that be? They don't get any additional money. They still get the student-based allocation.
Correct.
So what?
I think given the line of questioning that we've had tonight around this particular topic, we would be better served of just coming back with an update on the partners, the criteria. Tonight, the intent was to share the timeline. We have just started the conversations with interested parties, so Commissioner Arnold, we don't have the details yet of why they're interested or the background to share on each interested partner, but we'll be happy to do that and spend extensive amount of time on this topic when we convene in November.
But I do think we should review sort of expectations.
Yeah, what we can bring to you is the leadership competencies, for example, that were referenced tonight. And then we'll also have some of the data points to share as well on some of the interested partners.
Dr. Ferry, I'll add, we can also send the application so that you all, send back out to you the written application that all applicants have to complete so that you can see that as well as the interview sort of script and those things that we cover internally when we have those initial interviews.
If there are additional items that commissioners would like to see when we bring this back in November, we're happy to provide as much information as requested.
And I guess I'd ask everybody to sort of coordinate that through Zach. If we could have one portal in, he can synthesize it. So, Commissioner Bentley.
I did want to ask, can you let us know who the authorizers of the potential charter partners are? I've not heard of Invent Learning Hub. Is that a mayor authorized school or is that a okay?
Their mayor's office, and they have their charter in hand already. They went in the spring cycle.
Okay.
And
then Tenley Accelerated, that's all mayor's office, right? Phelan is state board?
Yes.
Purdue is mayor's office. And that's a second site?
Yes.
But do they have a location? It says Indy North. What does that mean?
Not final as far as I know.
Okay. And then KIP is mayor's office?
Yes.
Okay.
And so is the Path School, the first one on the restart. They're a charter as well.
And I think at some point it's important for us to have a conversation about why partnering with charter schools and creating these innovation partnerships, how that benefits the district. I mean, I'm a big believer in those partnerships and the benefits, but I think having a deeper conversation about why that's beneficial, not just to the students, but how it is beneficial to the district. I think that's important for us to have a conversation about, because we don't control who authorizes schools. That is certainly outside of our control completely. But I feel strongly that having those charter schools as partners of the district is a benefit to the district. I thought we might want to have a deeper conversation about that.
We're happy to do that, and we can include on the materials going forward the authorizers for all of the interested partners as well.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we do have a public commenter on this subject, I believe.
Yes,
Is that correct?
Chrissy Smith, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. I want to thank the Board and Administration for continuing to work towards racial and socioeconomic equity in the IPS magnet programs. I would also like to thank you all for your commitment to parent and community engagement. In a district as large and diverse as ours, both of these are extremely important. Last month, there was an issue at my children's school, Sidner Academy. The issue involved our principal taking a different position within the district. All parents agreed that both Mr. Nolan Watkins, the current principal, and Mrs. Varno, the soon-to-be interim principal, would both be phenomenal in their new positions. And we're excited to know that such talented educators would remain with us in the district. We had major concerns with the timing of this notification, and there was no conversation on the transition process. Fortunately, our parents were able to effectively advocate for our children, and kudos to the district for holding 2 parent meetings, one which was attended by Dr. Farabee. I hope that in the future, all major changes at any school are met with the same attentiveness before decisions are made. This brings me to an area of great concern. Tonight, there are 2 innovation conversion schools and 3 charter operators listed as restart partners. I was surprised to see that the timeline for these conversions and restarts are not set to have contracts voted on until March. This is extremely concerning because the lottery for choice schools opens next week on November 1st. So I went to the information about changes to enrollment. Nothing there about innovation school timelines. In an effort to have a solution-based response to issues, I offer the following 2 resolutions. The IPS School Board and IPS Administration need to prove its commitment to transparency, parent engagement, and truly informed school choice by placing a moratorium on any innovation schools for 2019. If schools are changed in such a drastic way after the lottery begins, then parents are not being given the opportunity to make truly informed decisions about their child's education. That informed choice is something that this board has consistently advocated for. Regardless of the process, there should be absolutely no major changes to schools after the lottery opens. If the board chooses to continue with the current process of not approving innovation schools until March, then it is only right that students at any new innovation school be allowed to bypass the enrollment lottery and automatically given a seat at any IPS school of their choosing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, commissioners, we're ready to get to graduation sites for the class of 2019. So this is a follow-up to the work session discussion we had about the shifts in our high school enrollment and the fact that a couple of the high schools now have a senior graduating class that may present challenges for the venue for their graduations. We will provide an overview quickly of what was discussed at that session and then provide an update on our recommendation at this point and how we will move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott Martin.
Yeah. Good evening again. So we continue to gather information and feedback about potential graduation sites. We've met with the principals and developed some options. What became clear to us as we look at the number of seniors versus the capacities of on-campus facilities, it was clear that we needed to come up with some other options. So option 1 is that all schools would stay in their own campus, but part of that is would necessitate limiting tickets, particularly to attics and tech, because of the number of graduates they have and the small space of their facilities. Option 2 all schools in a non-IPS facility. We've gone out into the community and looked for options. Of course, some important things to consider. If we had the right size space, anybody could go. Unlimited number of family members and friends and relatives. Could occur on the same day, allowing the board and district leadership to attend each graduation. It would incur additional costs. We want to consider the parking access, not just for what's available, but the cost to families to pay to attend those graduations. And there's always some logistics that we would need to consider, and that's graduation practices, transporting seniors to and from those sites so that they can make sure that they're ready for their big moment that evening. Option 3, all schools at Arsenal Tech. We thought about having it outside on the lawn in the courtyard area. It's a great space, it's cost effective, but you're going to have an inclement weather plan. One consideration that did come up through the conversation with the principals was that if you're not from Tech and you have to go there to graduate, it may be a negative perception. Option 4, Crispus Attucks and Arsenal Tech at a non-IPS facility, again, because those two schools with the number of graduates and the specific confines of the on-site facilities, those are the two that we see the biggest concern with. It would incur cost and potentially create inequities in terms of families and attendance as well as the student graduation experience. As part of option 4, Shortridge and George Washington could stay on their own campus. Option 5, Crispus Attucks and Arsenal Tech could go to Arsenal Tech. We do have feedback from the Crispus Attucks students that they just want to graduate, and they're not partial to their own campus. Shortridge and George Washington again would be on their own campuses. So the consideration criteria that we've looked at so far is the cost to the district, the overall student experience, as well as the family experience and access, the number of tickets that are available, the parking and additional costs to families. And of course, we want to continue the traditions and community building that we've established. So our recommendation tonight is that the graduation site be a leadership decision of that individual building. So each principal would make their own decision based on their feedback, both from their students and their families, and what's available at their site. We have gone out to the market and looked to see what else is available. The convention center is available. The fairgrounds arena, the Coliseum is available. We've also talked with the Murat, Hilbert Circle Theater, Clues Hall, and Marion University is actually building a new convocation center, which is going to be done next month and would have capacity and time as well to accommodate us. So those are where we're at right now. I'm happy to take any questions.
I find it shocking. Commissioner Bentley.
I know. Well, I made myself my feelings known on this issue at our work session. It never should have been something that came to the board. This should always have been a school level decision. So I'm glad that, after all this, we came to the same conclusion. But I hope that in the future, we really will look at, the logic on some of these things. I mean, I understand there's some facility situations at a couple of our campuses, but again, I just feel strongly this is a school level decision. This is something that should never have ever come this far. So that's just my opinion. Thanks for all the work on it. I'm glad that we've put it back in the hands of the people that should be making the decision, which are the school leaders and the students in those buildings.
I would only offer one suggestion in addition to, I think it is a school leadership decision, but I think there are also, when we consider cost implications of going elsewhere, should they choose to go elsewhere, there are community partners who I think would enjoy participating in helping to underwrite those costs, and happy to make some suggestions.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Those are all the reports for this evening. Next, Commissioner, we have action item. The first is on the real estate conversations that we've had in regards to the John Morton Finney Center of Education Services. This item is item 8.01 in new business. There's interest in potential sale, lease, or exchange of the education center, and we're requesting that commissioners approve the declaration of surplus for real property for the education center, and this will give the district an opportunity to pursue a potential sale, lease, or exchange, but does not require us to do so. Requesting that commissioners approve resolution number 7807 as presented.
I will remind commissioners we had a detailed presentation about this on Tuesday. Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 7807 approving the surplus declaration of the John Morton Finney Center for Education Services as presented?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Sullivan.
Yes, if the board administrator could remind me if this is one that I typically recuse myself on. I'm a little confused at this late time of the night.
Yes,
You will
that's
be.
me.
Okay, just on the making it surplus, I do. Okay, then I would like to be recused.
So noted. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
The next action item is item 8.02, relates to a property transfer in partnership with the city of Indianapolis Parks. This includes a small portion of property located at Charity Dye School 27. Request that commissioners approve resolution 7808 for the transfer of property adjacent to School 27 as presented. I believe there was a question around the access to the current bike trail. I believe that we may have gotten the updates. I'll look to Scott to share information that we received thus far.
Yep. So I did speak with the city parks about that, and the entire network is not complete, but it is the intent that yes, that it would eventually connect, be part of that trail connection.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 7808 approving the transfer of property adjacent to School 27 to Indy Parks as presented?
So moved.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I'm not going to recuse myself on this one because I don't think it has anything to do with development. Thank you.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
The last action item is item 8.03, which includes a recommendation for enrollment parameters and logic for the 2019-20 school year, to begin with the enrollment process starting on November 1st, recommending that commissioners approve resolution 7809. There's also in your materials an overview of all the proposed changes and current status of logic. The administration is happy to review that again this evening, but again requesting that commissioners approve resolution number 7809 as presented.
Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 7809 approving the choice enrollment parameters for school year 2019-2020 as presented?
So moved.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Hoops.
We talked about how, on Tuesday, how, it's a group of partners that obviously gets involved in deciding as a team what the dates are. We had a lot of discussion about just timing. When does that discussion happen for the next school year?
Once we have completed the enrollment process for the 2019-20 school year, that process includes a survey for families to complete. So once we receive the feedback from families on the process, that will be included in the discussions for any changes or any updates to the process for the 2021 school year. So I anticipate sometime late spring, early summer, we should have some indication of the feedback received and if we should move in any different type of direction as relates to the process. We'll also have a better indication of the number of families that have participated in round one, whether or not the round one, round two process was more favorable to particular zip codes or particular groups of students and families. And so that'll also give us some insight into whether or not the two-round process is something that we should continue or not. And I believe Commissioner Bentley, raised the question, or the concern rather, that we feel like there's always a change, and one of the principles that the Enroll Indy Board has embodied is this notion of continuous improvement and being responsive to the feedback that we receive from families. And so the goal is to review the feedback, review the analysis of what parents selected, also get feedback on the process and make changes accordingly.
We'll have a chance to have you share that with us and have discussion before that meeting of the
Yes, we will. We'll have a presentation from Enroll Indy, and then also the administration will bring forth some recommendation as well. It's also important to note that the board established a leadership working group, which includes school leaders as well. So it's not just the board having these discussions around the feedback and the process, but also school leaders are informing recommendations as well.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes, and I just want to remind everyone, we had a discussion about this on Tuesday when we discussed the agenda item, that we will have a more detailed, particular look at our diversity in our high demand programs with some suggestions from staff and some questions for us about how we move forward with our values on equity with that. So just want to remind folks of that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Does any commissioner have any closing comments before we close out tonight? I know they're not here, but I want to reiterate what I said with regards to the presentation on the Racial Equity Institute training, that I'm hopeful as an organization we can lead in creating the ability to have adult conversations. We have, in my opinion, moved backwards, and I think it's one of those great services we can provide. We can give our children the opportunity to be leaders in this front. So I thank Superintendent Fairby and the administration for all the work you're doing.
Thank you. It's definitely not easy conversations to have, but conversations we must have to move forward. So thank you, sir, for supporting it, and the entire Board of School Commissioners for supporting it and participating. If I will, sir, just two quick notes for the public of two important dates that we have coming forward tonight. We had the pleasure of honoring our finalists for Teacher of the Year and our Teacher of the Year, and we will do that formally on next Tuesday the 30th, and we have a great host on Eli Lilly and Company. I'm looking forward to celebrating the teachers and having the ability to invite their families and other staff members in to join in celebrating their achievements and accomplishment and being recognized by their peers. And then Saturday, November 10th, is our Showcase of Schools, which is our marquee event as we begin the enrollment process on November 1st. So we'll have the kickoff for Enroll Indy on November 1st, which includes a breakfast where Mayor Hogsett and I, other leaders, will join the community in encouraging to participate in the enrollment process, and then families have an opportunity to learn more about all of our school options at the Showcase of Schools, which will be again at the Indiana State Museum, and it'll be on Saturday, November 10th.
And I would only add there's one date in between there that is important. I won't tell people how to vote, but I will remind everybody that November 6th is Election Day, and I hope you do take the opportunity to vote.
And vote right.
Our next regular meeting will be our agenda review session on Tuesday, November 13th, beginning at 6 p.m. in this room. Having completed all the items on the agenda, this meeting stands adjourned.